Sequence start 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey there, everybody. Good evening. Glad to see you out there. I know a few of you are out there because I can see that we've got 28 viewers out of nearly 200,000. Thank you, YouTube, for not censoring. That's awesome of you, YouTube. Thank you so very much. We're going to get started in just a second here. We'll let a couple other people jump in. As they do come in, encourage everybody to hit the like button so that we can hopefully game the algorithm a little bit and see if we can get the system to push our feed out to more people. And as a reminder, if you do have your notifications on, or you think you do, you better double check, because YouTube routinely turns off notifications. Make sure you have notifications on and that it is set to everything. But take a look at this. Have you seen this? Just caught this headline here. I heard about this earlier today. Trump says it was an honor to host the Syrian president. The President of the United States says it was an honor to host President al-Julani of Syria. Okay, Trump supporters, before I can get this show started, we got to talk about this real fast. If you guys have been with me for any length of time, especially back during the Syrian conflict that raged for years, you will remember that I have talked about al-Julani quite a bit. For years, talking about al-Julani, all throughout the CIA's attempt to overthrow former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, using al-Qaeda and ISIS to do that. Throughout those years, throughout that conflict, this guy, al-Julani, who's named after, al-Julani is like the Golani, the guy from the Golan, okay? He was born in Saudi Arabia, but he's of Syrian descent, grew up in Damascus. This was the Sunni Islamist terror group known as Al-Nusra Front. It was Jabhat al-Nusra. They changed it to name after name after name. They kept rebranding because they had such a bad reputation. This was the most heinous of all of the al-Qaeda factions operating in Syria. And al-Julani was the leader. Al-Nusra Front was literally an official branch of al-Qaeda. It's not conspiracy theory. It was. The United States knew this. And the man whose honor it was to grace the White House, according to Donald Trump, the man being praised by Donald Trump, was literally the leader of the biggest terrorist faction connected to al-Qaeda in Syria. Al-Nusra Front had over 10,000 militants at its height. They were committing some of the most atrocious, evil, ungodly, unspeakable horrors of that entire bloody conflict. They massacred children. They staged false flag chemical attacks. They cut off the heads of enemies. There's video, literally, of some of them cutting the hearts out of their enemies after they killed them and taking bites out of their bloody hearts. And al-Julani, this guy right here, shaking hands with Donald Trump at the White House, was their leader. You may remember Al-Nusra Front was one of those factions receiving medical aid from the Israeli Defense Forces. Remember, a Sunni Islamist terror group, and the state of Israel and their military was providing them with aid to help put them back in the fight, which probably explains a little bit of why they're in the White House shaking hands with another Zionist asset, Donald J. Trump. Now, if you support Donald Trump after he tells the world that it was the honor of the American people in the United States to host this terrorist at the White House, folks, you can kiss my white ass. Welcome to Blackstone Intelligence. Cheers. I'm your host, Jake Blackstone, and I have got a fun show for you tonight. Fun if you want to learn truth, fun if you want to learn facts, Fun if you care about things like the U.S. Constitution. Tonight we're going to be talking about the out-of-control ICE raids and how they are shredding the fabric of American society. I'm going to show you what the law says about immigration, about how Trump's administration's actions are gross violations of that rule of law. We're going to talk about not just the problems, but the solutions. How do you actually fix the immigration problem? We're going to talk about some U.S. history, about parallels between our day and the days that led up to the American Revolution. We're going to cover a lot, although I am going to try and pack all of that into about 45 minutes once we get started here in a second. Give me a 5x5 out there if my audio's coming through. If I'm too loud, if I'm too low, let me know so that I can adjust here at the outset. I'm on fire. I got the spirit tonight. It's probably that energy drink I had 3 hours ago still keeping me giddy. Golden Mass says 5x5. All right. Thank you very much. So I put the links in just a minute ago to our ways you can donate. buymeacoffee.com/BlackstoneIntel, paypal.me/BlackstoneIntel, Cash App, $Jake Blackstone 333, Venmo, Jake Blackstone 333. You can go to blackstoneintel.substack.com, subscribe to our newsletter there. You get things like, for example, tonight's show. I'm going to take all of the content, all of the main content that we cover, pack it into a report, publish that on Substack. So hop on over there. For those that do choose to support Blackstone Intelligence tonight, every $5 that you donate through one of those options or through Super Chat gets you an entry into tonight's drawing, where you will, at the end, whoever wins, you will have the option of either a Jeff Epstein air freshener. This air freshener didn't hang itself. A free Palestine bracelet. A 1-month subscription, premium level, to either my Patreon or Substack, where you can get the Blackstone report, brimming with a lot of good information that will make you feel very smart as you talk to your friends. You'll have the facts to back up the material that you try and share with hard heads out there that are still stuck in that far right, far left paradigm of the Democrats are awesome, the Republicans are awesome, everybody else, your side is dumb. We don't do that here at Blackstone Intelligence. We take the truth. We don't care if you like it. We don't care if it serves the interests of the Republican Party. We don't care if it serves the interests of the Democrat Party. We don't care about parties. We care about the facts. And we will go wherever those facts take us. R Factor just made a donation, and I got a slip ready to go for you, R Factor. I got yours right here. We'll put you in twice, R Factor. Every $5 you get a donation. And tonight's goal is to get a minimum of 5 donations of $10 or more. All right. Oh, one last thing before we jump into the lesson for tonight. Anyone who does donate, last stream we had 2 people take me up on this. Anyone who donates $50 or more will get their choice of either an autographed pocket constitution or a free Palestine support kit. And that support kit comes with the bracelet that I showed you before. You get a Palestine flag lapel pin. Wear that proudly. It comes with a Palestine desk flag like the one that I have kept on my desk for years. You get some literature, some pro-Palestine stickers. $50 or more gets you that. All right. Well, let's jump in here. And I will try and keep an eye on the chat as we go through. So if you make a donation, I'll if I don't catch it while I'm talking, I'll acknowledge you at the end, okay? Because I do love and appreciate my supporters. All right. So let me tell you what got me thinking about this. I have talked about immigration off and on for years. Everybody knows that I believe that we need to control immigration. I think that we need to have smart immigration. I believe in immigration. It needs to be controlled. It needs to be smart. It needs to be, we need to be bringing people in who are going to assimilate and contribute to society and not simply be a drain on society's resources. And I have long believed that we need to be much more vigilant at taking care of this immigration problem. I first started thinking about immigration actually because the Democrats brought it up and made an issue of it back in the mid-90s when Bill Clinton was president. He devoted a lot of time talking to the problem of unchecked immigration. But having said that, there is a right way and a wrong way to go about dealing with the issue of immigration, just like there's a right way and a wrong way of handling any issue. And the way that we are handling this issue is wrong. It is not the right way to handle it. It is inhumane. It is awful. It is giving America a black eye throughout the world, and it is ripping us apart. And this is going to build a police state. This is, all right, give me a thumbs up or some sign out there in the chat if any of you were legal adults, voting age or above, back during 9/11. After 9/11, were you voting age? Let me know out there. Because if you are, you will remember the USA Patriot Act. Before 9/11, the deep state had tried to push through numerous times. All right, I'm starting to get the Joe Who, Hazel, Galen Halbert. Okay, so you guys will remember the Patriot Act. Before 9/11, the surveillance and police state system had tried over and over to cram through Congress some really egregious forms of surveillance and big government actions that just could not get the support of the members of Congress because the American people opposed it. But after 9/11, what they did was they took all of this garbage that had no chance of passing, and they put a red, white, and blue flag around it and called it the USA Patriot Act. And this was up until that point, the single biggest piece of legislation to expand the size of the U.S. government and cede great power over to a nationalized police state system. It was horrible. And there's been fallout ever since, right? We opposed that at the time. We did not oppose that at the time. Some of us did. Maybe some of you did. Because we knew this is just big government. They're just trying to sneak this crap in on us by appealing to our patriotism and by capitalizing on the fear that Americans had at that time, because our leaders were telling us ad nauseum that any day now they were going to hit us again and again and again. There would be more American deaths. The thousands who died on 9/11 would be nothing in comparison to when Al-Qaeda set off a dirty bomb in city after city. There would be millions of Americans dead, and the only chance we had is if we would just trust our federal government to do what is right for us and give them the tools and the powers and authority that we needed, that they needed to do this. And just like Chancellor Palpatine before the Galactic Senate, they promised they wouldn't abuse it. They promised they wouldn't use any more power than they needed to. But you know it's a damned lie. It always is a lie when the U.S. government says, trust me, we're going to do something in your best interest. We just need for you to give up some of your freedoms. It may be inconvenient to let us start monitoring you more, but we've got your best interests at heart. Okay, that was a lurch forward in the growth of a big brother police state. What is happening right now in the name of protecting America's borders from these, the fentanyl flooding across the border from the drug cartels, which are now terror organizations, according to Trump. Funny that Donald Trump will call he'll go down off the coast of Venezuela and blow up, fishermen and accuse them of being terrorists while he's shaking hands in the White House with a legitimate, stone cold, satanic terrorist like Al-Jilani. But I digress. What is happening, my biggest concern, aside from the inhumanity that we are displaying toward these people being targeted by ICE, my biggest concern is how the people on the right, those who claim to be the patriots, the watchmen on the tower, protecting America from those dastardly Democrats and those libtards and all the awful stuff they're doing, those people are cheering on this Orwellian monstrosity as it grows and grows and grows under the guise of protecting us from these dirty, awful, evil immigrants. You've got military in the streets. You've got this new federalized Gestapo going around into people's homes. We're going to talk about all this. But it is this massive, mammoth police state that is putting the USA Patriot Act to shame in the ramifications for what it's doing to America, to our liberties, and the impact it will have in our lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren. So tonight we're going to be talking about all of this. So hit the thumbs up and let's get started, okay? So I've been talking about this, but what got me, let me show you here. If I can bring this up on my screen. I saw a news headline today and I checked out the story. Let me see if this is it. Yeah, may not be real big on your screen, but baby pepper sprayed by DHS thugs during family grocery trip. Let me read a little bit of this to you. A baby girl was pepper sprayed in the face by Department of Homeland Security agents as her parents drove her home from a weekend family shopping trip. Footage shows a federal officer in a black vehicle launch the irritant out of their window and into the car of Rafael Veraza, 25 years old, and Evelyn Herrera, striking Veraza and their 1-year-old daughter, Ariana Sofia. Veraza told CBS Chicago, quote, "She couldn't open her eyes and struggled to believe. Us, we can handle it, but as kids, they shouldn't be targeting kids." The family had been leaving a Sam's Club store on Saturday after buying diapers, milk, and eggs when they saw a carload of federal agents heading towards them. Following the advice of her mother and Illinois Governor Pritzker, Herrera decided to film. Afterwards, bystanders flushed their faces with water as more black vehicles, which had been attending a nearby protest in Cicero, Illinois, sped through the lot. At a hospital, doctors called poison control for Ariana, washed her face with saline solution as the spray had triggered a severe asthmatic reaction. When I got there, my heartbeat was at 263 beats per minute. Since the incident, Ariana, the baby, has become clingy toward her parents, who say they were not part of any protests. Neighbors might be protesting, but they're not doing anything. All right. Let me turn the... may not be able to get the... let me turn the volume down. I know you can't see this really well, but you can see it a little bit.
Don't do it. There's Bovino.
All right, so anyway, this is just one of, I see this stuff a lot, and I'm sure you do too. There's been going on for weeks now, a lot of this ICE stuff. And some of it is, they're doing their jobs, doing the best they can with some of it. A lot of them, it is not just doing their jobs. They are getting their jollies off out there abusing U.S. citizens in addition to these people who don't have legal residency status. You can see these thugs. Some of them just love it. The way they go around whacking the protesters and doing everything that they're doing, it's sickening. In cities all across our country, we are now seeing armored vehicles rumbling down residential streets. We got these uniformed men. They don't have name tags. They are dragging people into unmarked vans. And the justification, if it's ever even given, is that they're doing it in the name of national security. This is all under Donald Trump's renewed campaign of law and order, which is kind of ironic considering how after he lost the 2020 election, his followers committed significant acts of violence against law enforcement who tried to stop them from storming the U.S. Capitol while they're chanting about how they're going to go hang the sitting vice president because he wasn't willing to go along with Trump's scheme to overturn the election results. But I digress. Under Trump's renewed campaign of law and order, we have seen federal law enforcement crossing a constitutional Rubicon. You got military personnel, militarized immigration agents. They're being dispatched into U.S. neighborhoods, rounding up suspects. They usually don't have warrants. They don't have probable cause. They have no regard for the citizenship of the people that they're seizing. And what do they call it? It's Orwell. Remember, Orwellian is a phrase used to describe Orwell-like 1984 society type actions. So one of the big things that Big Brother and the Ministry of Truth did in 1984 is they changed words. They used all kinds of words to mean different things. And because if you can control people's language, you can control what they think. And if you control what they think, you can control their behavior, keep them compliant and docile. So what are they calling this? The Trump administration calls all of this enhanced domestic security. Yeah, Golden Mask has it right out there in the chat. Newspeak. And you don't want to be guilty of a thought crime. But this is enhanced domestic security. But to a lot of Americans, like me and like some of you, really what this looks like is not enhanced domestic security. It looks like a slow motion coup against the people of the United States and our rights, such as the Fourth Amendment. Let me read Pocket Constitution. Let's read the Fourth Amendment. Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Okay, that is the Fourth Amendment. And over the last year, the Trump administration has expanded the reach of ICE, which is, I'll just say it the one time, you probably know, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and federalized National Guard units, all under the pretext of border enforcement and urban stabilization. Urban stabilization. There's some new speak for you. Because in reality, what they are doing is they're sending these forces around to patrol far away from the border. This is not about border control, border protection. They're in Los Angeles. That's not on the border. They're in Chicago and Portland. They're snatching individuals off sidewalks without warrants, without probable cause, as required by the U.S. Constitution. Only later do they even find out whether or not these people are, in fact, U.S. citizens or living here illegally. You've got judges in Oregon and California who have already ruled that these deployments of the National Guard are violations of not just state sovereignty, but also violations of federal law, and yet the operations have continued. Okay, the Trump administration is just saying, we don't really care what the courts say. We don't care that our founders set up a system of checks and balances. We're going to do what we want, and who's going to stop us? The government's justification echoes a very dangerous logic, which is detain first, sort it out later. And this is classic Donald Trump. I don't care what the law is. I don't care if it violates people's rights. We do what we want first, and we worry about whether it's legal or violates their rights after the fact, if we worry about it at all. And I want you to remember that Donald Trump said in front of journalists, when he was speaking to a delegation of U.S. senators and members of the House about gun control back during his first term. If you remember, let me set the stage. The Democrats were in there pushing for new gun control laws. This wasn't real long after, another school shooting. You had U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat, pushing. She had been pushing for a long time, but here's, never let a good crisis go to waste. She's pushing in this meeting for the government to ban 800 models of guns, including just a lot of basic standard hunting rifles. So with Dianne Feinstein, I'm going to show you a video in a second, with Feinstein sitting at Trump's shoulder, right next to him, Donald Trump calls on Republican congressional leaders to adopt Dianne Feinstein's gun ban legislation. And as the discussion goes on, Vice President Pence raises a concern. He says, we do want to deal with, gun violence, but we also have to respect gun rights. You don't want to seize guns from people without due process. In other words, Pence was saying, we don't really like to go down this path of the government just taking guns away from people without evidence against them. unless a court has reviewed the evidence, and you know, probably a good idea to check to see if there's justification to take away somebody's right to keep and bear arms and not just go on, you know, some random person's word. Right there in front of everybody, Trump disagreed with Pence. He said due process takes too long. He said the government should just take guns away from people without the need for evidence. Worry about the legality of it after the fact. Now, I did not have time to find, I've posted this all over in the past. I can't find the clips without this doggone Godzilla overlay. So I apologize. I'm going to play the clips. But I couldn't find the version that I have where it doesn't have the music. And this is back when I was doing the Vote Godzilla thing as an alternative to Trump and Biden, which I did in 2016 for Trump and Hillary, and again in 2020, getting people to not vote for either of these, these main candidates. So anyway, that's why you'll see this Vote Godzilla thing. So I'm sorry about that. I'll try and turn the volume up. But listen to what Trump says. And I think it starts out with actually Trump before he was president, talking about how he doesn't want anyone to have guns. And then it'll skip to the clips, some of the clips I'm talking about.
I mean, what we have now with guns is not that I'm a big fan at all.
Do you agree with the NRA?
I don't.
But
I'm
you
not
favor
necessarily the
long
nicest people
checks
in the world.
and how people get the guns. You don't
Yeah.
favor.
Look, there's nothing I like better than nobody has them. We're going to get it passed. We're going to get it passed.
You know, the problem, Diane, is that these aren't where you walk into a store and buy. These are where somebody hands you a gun and you hand them
Oh, no,
some
you
money.
go into a store and you can buy an AR-15.
You can.
You can buy a Tech 9.
The problem, they didn't take any guns away. Now, that could have been policing. I think they should have taken them away anyway, whether they had the right or not.
In the possession
Or
of that
might
individual.
take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early. We have to act. We can't wait and play games. Take the guns first, go through due process second.
Take the guns first, go through due process second. It takes too long to worry about people's constitutional rights. Take the guns. Take the guns. That's your guy, Trump supporters. Okay, that's your guy sitting next to Dianne Feinstein. And I didn't have in this, but in part of that meeting, he's in there asking Republican lawmakers to adopt Dianne Feinstein's gun ban and saying, take the guns. Okay, that's the I'm setting the stage here. Donald Trump does not give a damn about your rights. He doesn't care about the Constitution. He has never cared about the Constitution. He doesn't even have an idea of what it is. He certainly doesn't know what the Declaration of Independence is about. There's that hilarious video of the, very serious reporter in the Oval Office, and Trump's like, oh yeah, the Declaration of Independence I've got up on my wall. And the reporter says, what does it mean to you? And he says, it's a declaration, and it's a declaration of love and unity. That's what Trump said. The Declaration of Independence is not a declaration of unity. It's a declaration of separation. It is a divorce decree against the British Crown, against the British government. Oh my gosh. I mean, the guy doesn't have a clue what's in either of them. How could he possibly uphold the U.S. Constitution, which he swore to uphold when he put his hand on the Bible? So that's the attitude of Trump, okay? Don't worry about the rights of the people. If it's what I want, I am smarter than the founding fathers. I am smarter than these documents. Okay? That's who you're supporting, Trump supporters. All right. This really ought to send chills down your spine. Sitting U.S. president, brazenly calling for the rights of the people to be ignored because he thinks he knows better than you, better than the founding fathers, who should have rights and when they should have them. You know, our founding generation waged a war of revolution against their own government, the British government, for this very thing. Remember what the Declaration of Independence says? When I was a kid, we had to memorize, the preambles to the Declaration and the Constitution. I don't even know if they teach these documents in school anymore. But you old timers will remember a lot of it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And it goes on that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from who? From the consent of the governed, and that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, to the ends of preserving the rights of the people, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish that government. And after that bloody war for freedom was fought and won, the founders crafted a system of government that was intended to keep the American people from getting into that situation again, to prevent the rise of another King George III type tyrant, or a tyrannical government like the one they had just broken away from. And this system that they set up, including the limited powers that were allocated to a federal government, that's detailed in the U.S. Constitution. But as the founder said time and time again, the only way that we, the people, would stand any chance of preserving that system that was set up, or preserving our rights, is for us first to know our rights. Can't defend what you don't know. And to know what the powers of the government are, so we can keep those powers in check. And we were expected to stand up and fight for those rights against anyone who dared to try to take those rights away from us, especially fight against some self-crowned American king who sits himself down upon a throne of power in our own homeland and says things like, take the guns first, worry about whether it's legal or constitutional later. You all need to read and remember what is in our founding documents, including the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. In fact, I'm going to take this copy right now. I'm going to take a Sharpie. Put my signature across it. I am going to go, since we're going to be talking about a lot, but we're talking about the Fourth Amendment. I'm going to go in here with a highlighter. Amendment 4. I am going to highlight this right now so that you know that this is from today's broadcast. This was signed and used in tonight's live broadcast. The first person to make a donation of $15 or more, I will send this to you. And a special thank you note. Okay? I'm going to have that sitting here. I'll probably pull it out, refer to it again during the show. It's very important to know what the Constitution says and to take a stand in defense of it. So we're talking about the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment guarantees the right of every person, not citizen, every person, including non-citizens. That's what it says. And the founders explained why in their writings, that they used person and not citizen. Fourth Amendment guarantees the right of every person in America to be secure in their persons, their bodies, in their houses, their property, their papers, and their effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. But under Trump's direction, Trump, the tyrant who has a history of saying he doesn't care what the rights of the people are, under his direction, we now have federal goons who have turned this principle of the Fourth Amendment on its head. We have ICE raids going on, Joint Military Task Force going into homes, conducting home invasions. They don't have warrants as required by the Fourth Amendment. They are arresting not only people who are here illegally, they are arresting law-abiding U.S. citizens. They're doing this based on racial profiling. They are detaining U.S. citizens who don't have proof of citizenship on them. Show me your papers was something we heard from Nazi Germany. We're not supposed to have that in America. These are not isolated mistakes being made by the government. These are symptoms of a deliberate policy that treats the U.S. Constitution as an inconvenience at best. So I'm going to start off here by immediately addressing the most common thing, the most common objection that you hear from Trump supporters. Well, if they don't want to be arrested, they shouldn't be here illegally. If they don't want to be dragged out in front of their children and sent to foreign prison camps, I guess they shouldn't have broken the law to begin with, huh? They shouldn't have become criminals to begin with. All right, fine. I'll just, for the moment, ignore that most of the people who say this are, they talk about those jackasses who tried to carry out the violent insurrection on January 6th. They call them peaceful tourists, and after the fact, they were political prisoners, right? They didn't do anything wrong. They're just taking a nice leisurely stroll through the Capitol. Okay, fine. It is true that entering the United States or remaining in the United States, if you entered lawfully, if you enter the United States unlawfully, or if you stay here beyond the time period has expired that you can be here, that is wrong. You don't get any argument from me. I've been saying this for years that we got to deal with this. It's a violation of federal law. But let me explain to you what kind of law this is. This is a violation of Title 8 of the U.S. Code. It is not a felony. It's not even a crime. It is a civil infraction. It is a misdemeanor, not a felony. The U.S. Code defines it this way. It says, unlawful presence. So if you're overstaying a visa or you've entered legally, but you remained after the visa expired, unlawful presence is not a criminal offense. It is a civil violation handled through immigration courts, not the criminal justice system. Okay, that's one aspect. All right, improper entry. This is where you come into the United States without inspection, without authorization, is a federal misdemeanor under 8 United States Code 1325A for the first offense. The maximum penalty is up to 6 months in jail and or a fine. Okay, so from the U.S. legal system, we know what these people are guilty of. They're guilty of a federal misdemeanor, punishable by up to 6 months in jail, if it's even, prosecuted, or a fine. You know what else is considered a federal misdemeanor under Title 8? In other words, you know what else is also that exact same level crime? Trespassing on federal property. Same thing. Exact same punishment. So those people who entered the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and I'm not even talking about the people who were using bear mace on the cops or beating cops in their heads with flagpoles and that they're waving Trump signs with. I'm not talking about those people. I'm not talking about the people who went into congressional offices stealing property. I'm talking about those people who did enter the Capitol and just walk around. Maybe they had their hands in their pockets admiring the Capitol Rotunda, looking at the statues, appreciating U.S. history. Okay, all of these people who walked in after it was closed down by Capitol Police, they were guilty of the federal misdemeanor of trespassing on federal property. All right? Guilty of the same degree of offense as a Mexican who had work authorization to come in but overstayed it and has lived here for years afterward. That's the degree of offense we're talking about. That's not my opinion. That's a matter of fact. So how ridiculous would it be for me or you or anyone to argue that those people who went walking around the Capitol didn't commit any acts of violence, but they were trespassing on January 6th? How ridiculous would it be for us to argue that they ought to be dragged out of their homes in front of their children or out of their place of business by armed, masked gunmen, thrown into unmarked vehicles, and whisked off to a literal FEMA camp where they're going to be thrown in a cage, forced to sleep on the ground with a bunch of strangers until they can be deported to a maximum security prison in El Salvador or some other country that they didn't even come from, where they're likely going to spend years trying to survive being raped or murdered by actual hardened criminals. Would you take me seriously if I was saying that's what we ought to do to Trump supporters who committed that heinous act of federal trespassing on January 6th? Of course not. I wouldn't argue that because I'm not an idiot. Nor do I take you people seriously who say dumbass things like how some otherwise law-abiding guy who is an illegal resident who came from Mexico but has been here for 20 years working, that he somehow deserves to be separated from his family, caged like an animal, and deported to some godforsaken hellhole in El Salvador. That's what I think of you. It's inhumane. This immigration stuff going on today is smoke and mirrors to distract you. It's making you hate other people. Trump is controlling your mind by giving you an enemy to hate. That's what he excels at. It's a psyop. You're being manipulated. And you're too dumb to realize it. And best of all, he's using all this chaos to do what? To distract you from the fact that he's continuing to protect himself and other deep state globalists by refusing to release the Epstein files. You know, I'd be satisfied if we just went back to how Trump was handling immigration during his first term. You know, I'm not saying that everything is that he's always done this wrong. Back in his first term, most immigration cases were handled the way they always have been. They are processed through civil courts. Individuals are given notice as required by law. They have hearings before an immigration judge where they have the right to counsel. They have the right to present evidence in their own defense. If they have any, they may not have any, but at least they have the right to defend themselves. And if they're found guilty of whatever offense and they're ordered to be removed, the deportations were carried out through established procedures that minimized family disruption, that were humane, that treated them like human beings. Those who were found unlawfully present were typically allowed to arrange voluntary departure. They were even allowed to appeal the decision and go through an appellate process. See, during Trump's first term, there was some semblance of due process. But we don't have that anymore. At least not for everybody. So what's the right way? You know, we're talking about this as a problem. Well, what's your solution, Jake? My solution is we follow the law. There is a humane and constitutional approach to illegal immigration that we already have established. And it begins with restoring due process and proportionality. We treat immigration issues the way they should be, as civil matters, governed by law, not treated as a national emergency where you have to send in the U.S. troops. This is not a national emergency that requires the U.S. military to be patrolling our streets. And if you're a Trump supporter and you support that, screw you. You traitor. You traitor. You have given up your integrity. You have sacrificed what little virtue you may have had for the sake of following a cult leader. You don't care about America. You can wave your flag all you want to. When you take the position today that yesterday you used to talk about, oh, those Democrats. I'll tell you what, Obama's never going to leave office. That Obama. Oh yeah, you know that those military drills they're doing where they're training in Texas. Oh man, he's going to declare martial law. We're going to have troops in the streets. Oh yeah, you talked real tough back then about how you're going to take your guns and you're going to defend the homeland. But here you are, lapping at the marmalade bunghole of a legitimate tyrant, and you're too stupid to realize that you're on the wrong side. So the first step is to fully fund and expand the immigration court system. We've got a huge backlog. You've got to reduce that backlog. And the way you do that is you have to expand the personnel involved in immigration court. It'll be temporary. It may last a handful of years until we get caught up and get things in order. You got to resolve these cases promptly, fairly, rather than allowing years of legal limbo, which only encourages more and more violations of the law. So, you know, Trump has gotten all these corporate cronies who are looking for federal handouts for their businesses. He's gotten them to donate hundreds of millions of dollars to build Trump a gigantic, totally unnecessary ballroom, right? Maybe you could get a couple of these guys to chip in a few $100 million to fund, expansion of the immigration court system. Since we actually need that, don't really need a ballroom. Maybe the Trump family could chip in some of the revenue from the billions of dollars in crypto profits that they have racked in from their wholly corrupt crypto pay-for-play scheme, where they're taking money from foreign governments and investors. Or maybe we could just divert some of the billions of dollars away from the military-industrial complex that Trump has called to increase. Divert some of that money from maintaining the military-industrial complex with our 900 military bases around the world, acting like the world's policemen. Take some of that money, Donald Trump, and try and actually tackle the immigration problem here in America. But you know he's not going to do it because he's not serious about this problem any more than he was serious about building the wall in his first term. His first term ended, and according to his own government agency publishing the data, at the time he left office, all through the Biden presidency to the time that he's taken office again, out of the 1,000+ miles of border wall, they did less than 50. Trump supporters will say, oh, hundreds and hundreds of miles. Oh, yeah, sure. It's hundreds if you want to count Obama's wall. that he built during his term that the Trump just kind of fixed that up a little more. That's not new border wall. That's not what he said. He didn't campaign saying, let's go rebuild Obama's wall bigger. That wasn't the chant, was it? It was build new wall and have Mexico pay for it, which of course they didn't do. He wasn't serious about building the wall. It was a campaign slogan to manipulate you people. And this immigration stuff now, if he was serious about it now, he'd be handling it in a totally different way. We would be putting money into the immigration court system to try and handle it. So that's one thing. Deal with this by streamlining the process. Second, Congress could invest in modernizing our out-of-date visa processing and border technology. We could use smart surveillance, not militarization. You could pair it with community-based monitoring programs that have proven far more effective, far less abusive than mass detention. I mean, there are things like that. Even that stuff I don't like, but it's a possibility. You take asylum seekers, they should be given access to legal counsel and temporary work permits while their claims are adjudicated. Instead of taking these people who are here seeking asylum and they're stuck in limbo, instead of criminalizing them and deporting them before they even get to have hearings, we need to give them access to a system. And if we're going to enforce all of this, who should we prioritize? I know a lot of you out there who voted for Trump on this issue. I don't think that you were thinking, oh yeah, let me take my neighbor down the street who's lived here for the last 20 years, whose kids are doctors or are in the U.S. military. Let's deport him. He's the one I'm after. I know that most of you, that's not what you were thinking. You were thinking the drug cartels and the gangs and the MS-13, the rapists and the murderers and all these people that Trump got you afraid of. Yeah, we do have some of them, for sure. They are the ones that we ought to be prioritizing. Not some mom getting grabbed as she's coming out of a grocery store and dragged away in a black vehicle while her child is sitting there in the shopping cart screaming its head off, wondering who just stole my mother. We should prioritize repeat offenders, violent criminals. We should not be prioritizing long-term residents with deep community ties who have otherwise followed the law and have contributed to American society. Yes, we need to deal with their immigration status. Absolutely. Give them their day in court. But we deal first with the people who are repeat offenders. If you need to be going after somebody, go after them. If you've got undocumented people who have been here peacefully for years, give them a pathway to legal residency based on employment, compliance with tax laws. They've got to be taxpayers. They've got to have good conduct. They have to show that they respect the rule of law. You deal with this in a humane way. And I would say, lastly, all enforcement actions that we take needs to be subject to judicial warrants. It needs to be transparent. There needs to be government oversight. We need to ensure that constitutional safeguards are observed, especially the Fourth and the Fifth Amendments. We have to make sure that the Fourth and Fifth Amendments are never suspended in the name of politics or whatever stupid patriotic reason some corrupt politician comes up with to distract you from the Epstein files not being released. You see, we can have a balanced strategy that achieves the goals of dealing with illegal immigration that reflects our country's values, that liberty and law can coexist, that they don't have to compete with each other. We don't want to see masses of people being rounded up and thrown into detention camps. And we had that during World War II when American citizens who had committed no crimes were being rounded up and thrown into internment camps, the Japanese Americans. So this new wave of Trump-ordered street detentions and the military-backed ICE raids, it just takes all of these constitutional safeguards and it throws them to the wind. Because they go in and they seize people first, and they worry about identifying them later. It takes what was once an administrative process where there was a system to it, and it has just put it in the hands of these thugs to decide what to do on the spot. These jackbooted stormtroopers that are unconstrained by law, many of them clearly lack conscience. So let's talk for a minute about how Trump's domestic deployments and immigration crackdowns have managed to morph into this nationalized policing apparatus that's unchecked by courts for the most part, unchecked by Congress. The very kind of deep state monstrosity that Trump supporters used to say they were against before they became cheerleaders for the empire. So I'm going to take you through some real cases of American citizens and some of these long-term illegal residents. I'll just gloss over it because we can take a look at how some of these actions that we're seeing now violate federal law, how it violates the Posse Comitatus Act, how it violates the Bill of Rights, revisits the lessons of the American Revolution. You got to remember that the founding generation, the colonists, rose up against the same kind of abuses of power that our current government is inflicting on its own people. Because don't forget, when they go rounding people up based on how they look, they don't know their status. They don't know if they're citizens or non-citizens. They don't know because they're not following established rules of law. This is important because at stake is nothing less than our traditional form of American liberty, where we have a nation that was formerly governed by law, not by the whims of some executive who's willing to use the machinery of the state against his own citizens. Today, it's the illegals that he's going after. But Trump's got 3 years left. He's got 4 years left in office. 3 years left in office. Who's he going to go after next? When he gets tired of this, when this is, people get pissed off about this or whatever, who's he going to go after next? All right, when Trump returned to the White House, he came armed not only with this psychotic, deep-seated political vengeance, but he came in with a blueprint for turning federal law into basically just an extension of his own will. And the new immigration surge operations are not tactful. They're not measured bureaucratic initiatives that you would see in a normal presidency. These are militarized campaigns being waged on American soil. So that brings me to the presence of the troops. We saw back in the summer and into fall, Trump dispatched thousands of National Guard troops and other active duty military personnel to American cities under the justification of federal facility protection. Remember, they're only supposed to be operating on federal properties. Supposed to be. Because he doesn't have authorities, put them in the states. But that's not where they're staying. Because, someone might operate, some of these illegals might take actions against federal properties, so we need to go out and find them. That's kind of the justification. In Los Angeles, you had guard units out there deployed without the consent or certainly not the request of the governor. And a federal judge deemed it illegal under the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. That act forbids the use of military forces for civilian policing, except under explicit congressional authorization. Trump did that not only in LA, he did it in Chicago, did it in Portland, did it in Phoenix. And the residents of these cities are talking about, and you can see videos of it, heavily armed soldiers at intersections. They're conducting support operations, is what they say. But they're policing. That's what they're doing. They're stopping pedestrians, checking identification, detaining people who are like, I'm not going to show you my driver's license. Who are you to demand I'm a freaking American citizen? I have the right to walk down the street without being told I have to show my papers. Who are you? Well, they zip tie him and they're like, well, I guess you're not going anywhere then. The troops are operating under vague directives. Honestly, most of them don't even want to be doing this, but they're following orders. They've got these vague directives. They don't even really know what they're doing because you've got this merging of Homeland Security language with combat terminology. You're talking about stabilization zones, threat mitigation, containment corridors over here. They're blurring. They're using semantic blurs. They're erasing the boundary between domestic policing, regular law enforcement, and military occupation. So, I can't stand Gavin Newsom. I cannot stand Gavin Newsom. I've been griping about Gavin Newsom for years. Back in 2007, I actually I was obligated out of, because of the corporation I worked for, I was assigned clients. He was one of my clients. And I could have spoken to his assistants, and sometimes I did. But sometimes Gavin Newsom did not want anyone, including his wife, to know where he was going and with whom he was going there. And so he would call me. Make sure you don't send the documents to my office. In fact, don't produce any paper copies. There's probably, because of, NDAs that I could probably get myself in trouble by saying too much. So I won't say more than that. Little trips to the Caribbean. If he becomes our next U.S. president, which is a fair possibility, if he chooses to deploy the U.S. military, not to California, not to Oregon, but he decides he's going to send them to red states, say in the name of preventing another insurrection. Say I've heard that there's going to be another insurrection attempt. So how are you Trumpers going to feel? If you've got the U.S. military on your streets, in your neighborhoods, in your communities, saying, show us your ID. And if you don't turn it over, if you don't comply, they just yank out some zip ties, zip you up like a pig, put you on the ground. How's that going to make you feel? You're going to feel proud of the country you live in? You're going to be cheering for, oh yeah, I support this because it may be difficult, but I generally think that you should violate people's rights and check on the due process later. Because that's what I learned from Donald Trump. Is that going to be your attitude? Of course not. Of course not. And it shouldn't be. Try to remember that whole do unto others thing. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, because what goes around comes around, Trumpers. Remember that. This is a dangerous precedent being set by Trump. And if there is ever anything that my old boss Ron Paul has ever been right about, it was that big government actions come with unintended consequences called blowback. You can count on it. and the blowback against red states, that is what you're going to get if you don't stop engaging in this stupid groupthink and start standing up as independent-minded Americans who care about your fellow citizens and the erosion of their liberties. Anyway, man, I'm on my high horse tonight. And I'm not seeing, you know what? I'm not seeing many super chats out there. Is this not a good conversation? Let me take a look. What do we got out here? R Factor is the only person who has donated? What in the world? Come on now. I know you guys can do better than that. Show me some love out there. I'm not going to get paid from YouTube. I'm only going to get donations from you guys. Anyway, parallel to this massive military buildup that we're seeing, Trump ordered a huge recruitment drive for ICE. And so we ended up with thousands of new agents. And these are not the brightest and best that America has to offer, but they're the kind of guys who couldn't get hired as cops. They're the kind of people who didn't fit the right psych profile for government law enforcement jobs previously. But doggone it, we're going to let anybody, no matter how, you got Pete Hegseth out there talking about, we're not going to put up with our military being fat anymore. Have you seen some of these ICE agents that they've hired? Talk about porky pigs out there. But you know what? You offer a $50,000 sign-on bonus. You say you can wear a mask. You don't have to identify yourself. We're going to give you some really nice weaponry. Let you ride around. You're going to be able to go into people's homes. You're going to be able to snatch people off the street. If you see a protester and they say something that hurts your wee little feelings, you can go over and knock them on their ass with no consequence, which has happened. If you don't like protesters shouting at you with a bullhorn, you can shoot them with stun grenades, with pepper rounds, which has been done. Just watch a video of that. These are thugs. This is the closest thing that the United States has had to the SA or the SS. Okay, they function more like tactical squads than they do administrative officers. These people do not behave like typical American military or law enforcement. You know who they behave like? The freaking IDF. We now have, thanks to Donald Trump, an American version of the IDF. I guess it'd be more accurate to call it the ISF. Instead of the Israeli Defense Forces, we have Israel has the IDF, but they have their police force is called the ISF, Israeli Security Forces. And they're virtually indistinguishable from the IDF. They carry the automatic weapons. They stop people everywhere. And that's what we've got, folks. That's what we now have in America. We now have Israeli Zionist forces walking around the streets of America, doing whatever they want, violating our rights. And I can't say it enough. It is surreal to me that so many of these people that I stood with for years, going to rallies, this is before the age of Trump, going to rallies, going to patriot community meetings, going to militia meetings. I feel like I'm in a grieving process. So many of these people who I know were articulate in their at least rhetorically, in their defense of the U.S. Constitution. They understood the principles. And they're the ones, some of them, who are today defending the very thing that they used to speak out against. I haven't changed. My positions are the same. My values are the same. The stuff I speak out against is the same today as it was a decade ago, as it was 2 decades ago. But I have watched my former associates slide over into this fascist mentality that we need a strong man who is superior to a system like the outdated U.S. Constitution. It's just astounding to me that we have gotten to this point. You have ICE out there operating mobile command posts. They have surveillance drones. They have armored vehicles. They've got biometric scanners. And their mandate goes well beyond just immigration enforcement. In places like Chicago or Dallas, they're out there recording individuals on public sidewalks, demanding identification without probable cause. Has nothing to do with immigration. Nothing to do with immigration. And heaven forbid you're an American who happens to be out walking without your ID on you. You can't produce immediate proof of citizenship. These Nazis, using the Trump, defame to arrest first, question later. This is comparable to something back during the colonial days of America, where the British soldiers had what were called general warrants, walking around in colonial America, able to stop people, grab people, detain people, arrest people. So anyway, these raids that are going on, they occur under misleading pretenses. You got agents impersonating, in some cases, they're impersonating local cops. They're going into homes claiming that they're there to investigate. They've had reports of criminal activity. Even though they're lying, they haven't had reports of criminal activity. They go in pretending to be local cops, and when they're there, when they let them in, they detain them to do immigration checks. There have been lawsuits over this. The ACLU and local advocacy groups have documented not a couple, but dozens of these kinds of encounters. And in almost none of the cases are the ICE officers presenting judicial warrants. What they present, when they present anything, what they're presenting are something called administrative orders. We don't need a warrant. You do. We don't need a warrant. We have administrative orders. Oh yeah, who signed it? My supervisor. That's what they're using. They're giving themselves these pseudo authorizations which have no legal authority. It does not authorize them to enter into any private dwellings, but they're using them to trick people into letting them into houses because the people think, well, what average citizen is going to sit there and say, oh, well, I see that you're saying you've got an administrative order signed by your supervisor to enter my home. Well, actually, I know that you need an actual judicial warrant. You can't enter. I know you've got the guns. I know you're threatening to take me, but I'm going to shut the door now. Thanks. People don't do that in most cases. They should. They should. One of the most disturbing developments has been the resurgence of collateral arrests. This is where ICE or some joint task force will go in and detain anybody that they find during a raid. They'll go to the Home Depot parking lot. They'll go to a car wash. Doesn't matter if they even find the original person that they claim to have been going after. They'll go in to an apartment complex or to a particular area out in the public street, say that they were looking for a certain person, but they just snatch everybody. We've got reports from Illinois and Texas describing raids where you've got entire groups of parents who are there dropping off their kids at school who get arrested, who get detained. Why? Because ICE comes in and says, we were looking for so-and-so, but we're going to check everybody now. And this is not just illegal aliens. U.S. citizens are getting ensnared in this. In many cases, individuals that were born in America, raised in the United States, completely law-abiding citizens, they have been detained not just for a couple hours, for days. For days. What if it was your wife, your husband, your child, your mother, who goes shopping, doesn't come home? You don't know where they are. Turns out they were kidnapped by the federal government and kept for days while the government checks to see who you are or who that person is. Everyone is guilty until proven innocent, according to this system that Trump has implemented. It is un-American. And I'll just throw this out. Anybody that accuses you of you have TDS. If you don't like this, you have TDS. That's right. I do have TDS. It's called a traitor detection system. And I detect that you are a traitor to America. I'm proud of my TDS because I can tell who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And you're not on the right side, my friend. Flip that around on them. The traitor detection system. Trump's Department of Homeland Security, which was created after 9/11, has repeatedly overridden or just flat out ignored what the authorities at the state and local level have said. They just ignore what they say. Up until this Trump era, so-called conservatives used to believe in something called state sovereignty. They used to believe that the states had more authority than the federal government, especially in things like policing their own people. And that's actually what the U.S. Constitution says. The 10th Amendment. I guess nobody wants this. Nobody's made a donation for it. 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States, talking about the government, by the Constitution, nor prohibited it by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. In other words, the U.S. Constitution outlines a narrow set of powers given to a federal government. Everything not specifically enumerated is a power reserved either by state governments or by the people themselves. This does not have to be a super long document. It doesn't have to be the entire federal code. What it does have to do is give you the outline. And it does. It gives us the outline for how our system works. And our system is supposed to respect state sovereignty. Donald Trump does not respect state sovereignty. Governors in Oregon, California, they protested that federal troops were going to be sent in. They didn't want federal troops. They protested that these troops were going to come in and not coordinate with state authorities. And yet there's Trump saying, this is a national emergency. I'm using emergency national security powers. Screw you, governors. Screw you, mayors. Screw you, local police. We are the federal government. Did you ever think that the cheerleaders for the federal government would be the Trump supporters? So you got mayors in some of these cities who refuse to cooperate with ICE. You know what happened? Federal government said, guess what? We're going to pull the funding for your local police. With, Trumpers cheering it on. The fact that conservatives are cheering for this kind of federal government takeover of states' rights and all of this federal abuse, it's proof that the party of Ronald Reagan that I knew as a kid, it's dead, it's buried, it's gone. Whatever the Republican Party is today, I want no part of it. It is not the Republican Party that I knew in my youth. Which was, it always had its problems, but man, this Frankenstein thing that has been cobbled together, combination of, you take the pieces out of the graveyard. You've got the Zionists, you've got the neocons, you've got the billionaires, you've got the crony capitalists, you've got the Saudi royals. You've got all of these things, you put it together, and that's what our system is today. A Frankenstein, a top-down system of domination where the principles of federalism that reserved policing power primarily to the states is long gone. The founders envisioned a decentralized system precisely because of this, to prevent a standing army, to prevent a president from ruling our local streets. Trump's approach flips all of that on its head. And maybe the most insidious aspect of these Trump operations are how it is normalizing this. The public is being told that troops and the raids, this is all temporary. These are all limited measures, for border control. They're expanding deeper into America, deeper into the interior, nowhere near the borders. It's exactly what the government of Zionist Israel always says at the outset of what it knows is going to be a years-long military operation. They say, oh, don't worry, we're just going to go in a little bit. We're just going to, just the tip. That's what Trump is saying to America with deploying the military. Just the tip, I promise. That's not the end of it. Just like Israel's propaganda language being used by the Zionist-controlled Trump administration, they're out there using this Orwellian newspeak, talking about how agents are assisting us. The drones flying above us, they're just monitoring. Checkpoints are not, fascist checkpoints. They're data verification sites. So in practice, the country is acclimating. Right now, people are starting to object to it more vocally, but in time they get used to it. It's kind of like, there was a lot of, we're not going to go to war with Iran. It's never going to happen. Trump's never going to attack. And then he goes and he's getting ready to attack. And like, no. You get some Trump supporters saying, no, we're against this. He's like, yeah, screw you. And he attacks. And then they go silent. And so now anything that he does, they're going to let him do. That's okay. He's not going to do that with the Epstein stuff. We know he's not going to do that. He's not going to cover up for Epstein. Sure, he wished Ghislaine Maxwell well, but he's not going to move her to some cushy place. He's not going to give her a pardon. None of that. Look, he put Kash Patel in there. He's got Pam Bondi. They're going to go after all of these pedophiles. QAnon. Save the children. We got the right guy in there. Except he didn't just not release the files. He told you, Trump supporters, he does not want or need your support if you are stupid enough to believe that the Epstein files are anything other than fake news a big hoax written by Biden, who I guess is too, supposed to be really stupid and can't function, but apparently is also smart enough to create over 100,000 pages of Epstein files that somehow have been around for, over a decade. I guess Biden really had foresight. Hillary was in on it. James Comey was in on it. Yeah, Dan Bongino. So what happened? He just held out. I told you guys there's a 2-week window. If Trump can hold on for 2 weeks, when his base is pissed off about something that he's doing, if he will just ignore them for 2 weeks, they'll come around. They'll either come around and, one, support what he's wanting to do, which is contrary to what he told them he would do, or two, they'll just pretend like it doesn't exist. And that's what they've done. How many Trump supporters are out there demanding the Epstein files be released? It's gone dead. The story's gone dead. They acclimated to this new paradigm that we actually don't need to save the children. They're fine. We don't need to release the Epstein files. The Trump people have acclimated to this. This is the new normal. Likewise, Trump supporters are acclimating to the presence of the U.S. military and a federal Gestapo more and more involved in our everyday lives, surveilling us with powers coming from Trump's BFFs in Israeli intelligence corporations. You don't believe me? Look up some of these companies. Take a look at what they're doing and how they're involved with ICE and all of this. Paragon Solutions, Cellebrite Digital Forensics, NSO Group, which helped him a lot by operating pro-Trump social media psyops back in his 2016 presidential run. But most notably, Palantir Technologies. This surveillance state, this police surveillance state that Trump is creating with the help of Israel is here to stay. Because the Trump people are either too cowardly to take a stand against him or too stupid to realize what's being done to them and how they're being manipulated like ignorant pawns. Isn't it crazy that the people speaking out against the encroachment of this ever-growing police and surveillance state are the Democrats? That it's the ACLU and other civil liberties groups that are out there warning about this creeping intelligence and militarization and how it mirrors the slow erosion of rights that we have seen in other democracies that slid into authoritarianism? I have not seen one Trump supporter with a sign out there protesting anywhere at any time against this growing police state that he is overseeing. But every single day for months now, there's an overpass in Winston-Salem that I go by fairly frequently. Doesn't matter what day of the week it is, there are dozens of protesters with signs up on this overpass. You know, it's not a big highway, but going through downtown bridge. They got the fence up so that you can't throw stuff down. Covered in signs talking about protesting things like the erosion of our liberties. These are the Democrats. The Republicans have become the bad guys. Unbelievable. Do yourselves a favor and turn off the brain rot that is Fox News. How can you possibly not recognize that garbage is deep state propaganda? Don't turn around and listen to CNN or MSNBC. You'll just get the crap from a different perspective. But corporate media, they're all in it together. They just cater to different demographics. CNN and MSNBC, they'll tell you support war, support war, support war, support all this garbage in a way that appeals to Democrats. And then on the right, you get it from Fox News and that little pissant media company, ONN or whatever they're called. Don't listen to corporate media. I'm not saying don't listen to news, but be judicious. And if all you can do is find the major news networks, at least avoid the opinion journalism shows like Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow. That's not news. Avoid the what's his name? Gutberg, whatever his name is on Fox. That kind of garbage. Most of these talking heads, that's not news. It's entertainment. It's entertainment to tickle the ears of a particular demographic in exchange for keeping you glued to the TV so that they can keep feeding ads to you. They monetize your stupidity. That's how it goes. I could skim through some cases here. What time are we at? I'll tell you, without sounding like a real jerk here, I'm kind of disinclined to give some of this in, this next segment here. I've got as much content as I've given so far. I've got that much more that I could go, but yeah, I feel rather unsupported out there. Other than R Factor, I wouldn't mind it if a couple people made a donation here or there. Actually, I did get Golden Mask. Thank you. I see that you actually donated through CashApp. Thank you. You rock. Be like R Factor and Golden Mask. So let me skim through a little of this here. Just some cases from the last couple of months to illustrate how the expanded enforcement practices under this Trump administration have impacted both U.S. citizens and these long-term illegal residents or undocumented people here in the United States. In Florida, federal court ruled that a U.S. citizen, a guy named Peter Brown, had been illegally detained by a county sheriff at the request of ICE. They wrongly identified him as a deportable immigrant. Turns out he was just a regular U.S. citizen. They violated his Fourth Amendment rights. This was determined in court. They violated his Fourth Amendment rights. They said that ICE lacked probable cause. Over in Alabama, red state, there was a citizen who was U.S. citizen who had been born in Florida, Leonardo Venegas. They snatched him. And the video is out there. He was at his construction job. They wrestle him to the ground. ICE goes in, immigration type raid. They wrestle him to the ground. He's shouting at them, "I'm a U.S. citizen." They don't want to hear it. They wouldn't let him go get his ID. They just took him away. In Los Angeles, U.S. citizen Job Garcia. ICE goes into a Home Depot parking lot, start grabbing people. They had the ICE agents, they didn't have any ID on them, didn't identify themselves, grabbed him. He said he's a U.S. citizen. They didn't care. They took him away, detained him. He won his case. In Chicago, 22 people, including U.S. citizens, were part of a federal court action alleging unlawful arrests and detainment by ICE. They got a settlement. It's good that some people are able to go to court and get a little justice back, but really given the option of getting a taste of justice through the court system or not being treated like a criminal to begin with, which would you choose? I know I would prefer not to be grabbed in front of my coworkers or my family, wrestled down, have my face shoved into the pavement, and get dragged off by masked, armed gunmen. That would be my preference, but call me crazy. Just seems like the better option. These are just a couple examples that show that it's U.S. citizens, not just illegal aliens, who are getting caught up in enforcement operations. These operations, they don't care if you've got citizenship status. It ignores all of that, ignores proper legal safeguards. And I'm gonna skip over. I may mention when I type this stuff up for the Substack report that I'll do based on this show, I'll probably put in some examples of the undocumenteds that, some of the ICE raids and how it's affected them, what's happened with them. But for the sake of time, I'm going to skip that. Basically, what the various cases reveal are patterns of warrantless or, best case scenario, low probable cause stops. Shows that there are insufficient verification of citizenship or status. They're not after that. ICE doesn't give a damn. It shows that there are collateral impacts on the bystanders, on community members who have done nothing wrong. They're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The fact that U.S. citizens are being detained, it undermines this lie that the Trump administration is just going after, these hardened MS-13 criminals. It's BS. And even if they were, it doesn't change the fact that even if you have a warrant, these people still have rights. Because again, the U.S. Constitution, when it comes to the 4th, 5th Amendments, these are rights of due process given to persons, not citizens. So when you target these long-term residents, whether they are documented or not, when you're going after them in large sweeps, thinking this is going to be a deterrent, it's not a deterrent. Sure, it's a fear engine. You'll scare the hell out of an entire community. You will reduce civic engagement. You will take people who were participating in community, doing good things like normal Americans do. Sure, you'll frighten them into hiding out, living in fear, withdrawing, not putting their money into the economy, weakening trust in their local governments as well as the federal government. Yeah, all that happens. It blurs the lines between immigration enforcement and the general police functions. People don't know what to think. They don't understand the system they're living in anymore. And I'm not talking about the illegals. I'm talking about American citizens living in these areas where this is happening. And it's expanding. Some people are being treated as suspects simply because they're working in certain industries or they have a certain skin color. Trump supporters and others beyond Trump supporters, but mostly Trump supporters, are just, I see videos all the time of people insulting people of Hispanic origin, Hispanic ethnicity, talking about, I'm going to call ICE on you. I mean, just racist jackassery. And the thing is, American citizens that do have some kind of Central or South American history, ethnic history, they have reason to be afraid, even if they're here legally, because it doesn't matter what their legal status is. I remember after 9/11, after the Patriot Act, among the things that the U.S. government did, I don't know if any of you will remember this, was they created a hotline for people to call and report suspicious neighbors. Anything that, if you see something, say something. They had it was a hotline for the FBI, and people started reporting their neighbors. Michael out there, thank you for buying 2 coffees at Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you. I just got that notification. I had some jerk, some reverend, I still remember his name, Reverend Jim Sutter. I used to operate a huge, this is in the early days of the internet still. I was running the largest 9/11 citizens 9/11 investigation group on the internet. And one of the people in it was a retired Marine. He had been a chaplain or something. But he was back then what the hardcore Trump supporters are today. Just a intolerant jackass. And he did not like that I was against the Iraq War in the build-up to the Iraq War. And so he called this tip line repeatedly to report me as being a terrorist sympathizer. And nothing came of it. Well, I don't know. Actually, you know what? Back then, this would have been around 2003, 2004. Oh, that's long before my YouTube days. So I didn't start YouTube until 2012. Yeah. Back then, they used to print on your boarding pass. If they put you on a watch list, you had a series of, I think it was X's. Now, at that time, I was working as a travel agent, so I was traveling all the time. I had kind of like fast pass status. I get through lines quickly. I had an IATA number. If you're a travel agent, you know what that is. That's kind of like your special number, gives you perks and stuff like that. But I suddenly started getting stopped every single time I went through the security line. Every time they would pull me aside, they'd do the full search. They'd search all my stuff. They'd do the bomb thing, check for everything in my luggage, in my carry-ons, every single time. And that's back before it was well known what the little thing is. What they were doing was I had marked on my boarding passes whatever the code was, and as they scanned me as I came through, they were like, okay, we got to do extra security on this guy. And the only thing was I was speaking out against the Iraq War. And I wonder now in hindsight if they didn't put that on there as a result of this guy reporting me repeatedly. He even said, oh, what was that guy's name? There was some domestic terrorist. I can't remember the guy's name right now that ended up being around that time that they ended up finding him hiding out in some mountains of North Carolina or somewhere. But anyway, this Reverend Jim Sutter guy reported me as being an associate of this guy. Had no evidence whatsoever. But because I lived in North Carolina, he was like, oh, he must be. So anyway, my point is, I know what it's like to be an innocent, law-abiding U.S. citizen who went through a minor, in the scheme of things, being harassed every time I went through the airport, which was multiple times a month. It was annoying, but not like, I'm a victim here. But We are living in a time where those kinds of Reverend Jim Sutters are now calling to report neighbors to ICE. Even people that they know are U.S. citizens, because they know ICE will go after people based on skin color or appearance. That is awful. Awful. I used to be so much less tolerant of illegal immigrants than I am now, thanks to the extreme behavior of these people, these Trumpers. I'll tell you what. It's just appalling what's happening to American society. Fortunately, we're seeing a little more pushback from local and state governments. Like over in Tennessee, neighboring state of Tennessee here, they filed a lawsuit challenging the deployment of the National Guard to Memphis. But, you know, so we've got the Fourth Amendment's guarantee to be secure in our persons against unreasonable searches and seizures. That is eroded when they grab citizens or persons, non-citizens, without proper cause. And it's happening so much, and they're getting away with it so much that it's become normalized already. This kind of abuse of our constitutional rights has become normalized. You've got communities in all across the country where you've got a greater concentration of immigrants. They're living under more fear, more stress, more uncertainty. And like I said, that undermines their civic participation. You think they're going to call the cops when they need help? You think they're going to call the cops when they see something happening? Why would they? When you've got ICE embedded with local cops, or you've got ICE pretending to be local cops going around after people. These aggressive raids have been shifting the balance of power, where it's no longer the power that is invested in the individual and the state. It's the federal government, where they can use force against you. You don't need to be doing anything other than standing on the public sidewalk, yelling at them in protest, which is First Amendment protected right to protest. They can now turn and shoot you with pepper rounds and shock grenades and things, and get away with it. Get away with it. You have virtually no recourse. Who are these people? How can you hold them accountable if they can't be identified? That's why they don't identify. If these people start identifying, they'll say, oh, it's for our own protection. Bullcrap. Every freaking cop out there is required to identify. You think that cops and FBI and everyone else that's required to identify themselves, that somehow these Timu level ICE people, these thugs that have been hired, that somehow they're above all of them and they don't have to identify? They do it because they don't identify, because they know what they're doing is wrong. They know they are violating the law. They know that if they go and they shove someone or grab someone or do something, you can sue them if you can identify them. But if you can't identify them, you're out of luck. This is very, very awful. What they are doing is wrong, and they know it's wrong, and that's why they are hiding. Cowards. ICE. You're a bunch of damned cowards. We should be able to litigate. We should be able to sue if our rights are violated. But we can't do that if we don't know who is violating our rights. The United States was built on this idea that government and the power we give government has to be restrained or constrained by law. So when you've got the Trump administration using the military, using immigration forces within our own borders, violating our rights, that is a frontal assault on not just us, but on our system of laws that protect us. This is not just a matter of bad policy. This is a profound constitutional crisis that cuts to the very core of the Bill of Rights, and we must stand up and speak out. Democrats, do better. You need to do better. Why the hell are you Democrats not making a bigger issue of this? I know a lot of them are, certainly a lot more than the Republicans, but you're not doing good enough. And Republicans, wake up, take your nuts out of Donald Trump's purse, be men again, and take a stand against tyranny. Or shut up and stay out of the way of those of us who have the will and the courage to speak out. I've got a lot more that I could go through, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue ranting if I go on. I got a lot more. I had some stuff on, like, Supreme Court cases and things like that. I think I'm going to skip most of that, and maybe I'll put it in the Substack article. Let me put that Substack thing back here real quick. Let me find my link. Okay. So I want you to sign up on Substack even if you're not going to become a paid supporter. I would prefer that you subscribe for $5 a month as a paid member, but at the very least, become a free member. Thank you, Marjorie Foster, for your donation. So kind of you, Marjorie. Says, thank you. Important message. I appreciate you, Marjorie. Sign up on Substack. If they boot me off YouTube again, that's how I'm going to be able to let you know where I'm at or what's going on. And I give out some free previews, and sometimes I'll give you a couple pages worth of a Substack article for free and stuff like that. So become a free. Don't just do the follow. If you follow me on Substack, that doesn't really do anything. You have to actually subscribe you can still subscribe for free, but do that. I also publish my reports to Patreon. So if you are someone, say you've got a Patreon account and it would be easier to do it there, I'm putting that link in as well. On Patreon, I also post the same articles I put on Substack, I put on Patreon. The difference is on Substack, I usually have more photos or images embedded in, and it's a little harder to do some of that on Patreon. And I don't publish any. There's no way to publish on, like, Buy Me a Coffee, but if you are someone who gives donations through Buy Me a Coffee, there's that link. And if you would prefer to do it on PayPal, here is that link. On Cash App or Venmo, it's Jake Blackstone 333. On Cash App, you have to put the $sign in first. So there's a couple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little music on, and I'm going to sit here and gather together the donation information so that we can do the drawing. I've got a autographed pocket constitution here, and nobody wanted that. Donation of $15 get you that as free shipping. Bring me to tears. Nobody wants my Constitution. All right, but anyway, so let me put some music on, and you can let me know in the chat if it's too loud or whatever, because I don't want it blaring in your ears, but at least you'll have some background noise while I take the names down for the people that are going to be in the drawing, okay? Let's see here. And sorry, it's like, it's we're on YouTube, so I can't use copyrighted music. I have to use this kind of generic music, so sorry about that, but whatever. Here, I'll adjust the volume. Let me know in the chat if that is too loud or not loud enough. Now's your chance to get any last-minute donations in. $5 or more gets you an entry. For every $5, you get an entry into the drawing. And the gifts you can choose for whoever wins, again, are going to be either a free Palestine bracelet, a Jeff Epstein "This air freshener didn't hang itself," a printed copy of tonight's broadcast signed by me, or a letter from me, or a free month of either Patreon or Substack. So if you want to get an entry in, now's the time. Sure would appreciate some financial support out there. Let me show you what I've got so far, and you guys let me know if I'm missing anyone, okay? I have got Golden Mask, two entries for Golden Mask. I have got Michael M. Another one for Michael M. I have got R Factor. And a second one for R Factor. So we've got those three, and we've got Marjorie Foster, who made her donation. So we've got 3 people in the drawing. There's a good chance, good odds for winning if you're out there. We've got 89 people watching right now, 91 likes. Hit the like button out there. Have I missed anyone so far? If you know that you have made a donation and I have missed it, I haven't seen it because maybe it went to one of these other platforms, tell me in the chat so I'll know to include you. Oh, Marjorie's coming in to make another donation here. Yeah, Marjorie, we'll get you in there. Down a little bit. In the end, anyone who made a donation but did not win, I'll give you a consolation prize. I'd be glad to send you a Blackstone Intelligence postcard. You would just have to email me at jake@blackstoneintel.com. jake@blackstoneintel.com. Put that there in the chat so you've got it. All right. Thank you, Marjorie. All right, Marjorie. Thank you so much. I'm gonna put you in the drawing here. All right. Marjorie and Marjorie. We got 2 entries for Marjorie. All right. Have I missed anyone else? All right, I'm gonna... Yeah, I'm back. I've been back. All right, I'm going to put everybody's entries in here. So we got you in this so you can see them, so you know I'm not goofing around. Here we are. Oh, thank you, Marjorie. That's sweet of you. I know, things are tight. I make donations to streamers that I like, that I support. And I know in fact, gets me in a little trouble with the wife sometimes for doing a little too much. I try and support the streamers that I like. I'm not talking about the geopolitical stuff because honestly, I hardly ever watch anyone else. I just don't. I'm talking about other stuff. Let me turn this music completely off here. Okay. Yeah, streamers in other genres that I follow. And I know it's tight. Every time I go to donate, I'm like, ugh. But I do it. All right, so we got everybody in here. And I'm going to shake it up real good. All right, here we go. Haven't seen your videos promoted since the Ukraine war back in 2022. I know. I'm on the naughty list. I'm not going to get any promotion whatsoever from YouTube. It's crazy. I used to get, on a bad night, I had about 1,500 people in my stream. You couldn't slow that. I always had to have the slow mode on the chat because it was just so many people typing. I had to have tons of moderators in the room just to keep a handle on things. But yeah, YouTube just does, they don't like people that speak out against the system. It's like, I don't even bother on Twitter anymore. No point. The last 2 tweets I did on Twitter were seen by nobody. Not a single like. Doesn't matter that I'm down to 22,000. I was up at almost 30,000 people till Elon Musk started purging me. But anyway, I don't even bother. There's no point other than like personal documentation, I guess, if I wanted to document my thoughts on Twitter. But no point. It doesn't go out to anyone. Not even my own followers see my stuff because I'm shadow banned. And that's how it is for the most part on YouTube. But just keep trying. Who cares? I'm glad to reach those people that I do. Yeah, if I have regular streams, I will get more over time. But I did it for like 3 months straight. And never got above roughly what I've got now. It just, that's how it is. But, I was going to say, I'm not complaining. Yeah, I am. I'm definitely complaining. Anyway, all right, let's do this. Let's do this drawing. I guess you can see it. I'm going to reach in here and just grab the first one make sure I've only got one. Whoops, I think I just ripped it some. Who do you think? We've only got 4 people in the drawing. Who do you guys think is the winner? Place your bets. Who is the winner? We've got R Factor, Michael, Marjorie. Our winner tonight is Marjorie. Marjorie won. Sorry, I ripped your name there a little bit. Marjorie, you are the winner. So, Miss Marjorie, here's how it works. You can, if you want either the Patreon or Substack subscription, a month subscription to that, all I would need is the email address to give you the link for that. And you can email me at jake@blackstoneintel.com. But if you would like one of the other things that I mentioned, what you would need to do is give me an address, tell me which thing you want, and then email me your address, and I can send you one of the physical products. I just need to know where to send it to. Jake@blackstoneintel.com. And like I said, to the other folks who were generous and supported, I'd be glad to send you a letter or a postcard or something if you'd like. You just need to email me at jake@blackstoneintel.com. Let me know. Michael says, are we supposed to get notifications when you're on? Nothing came up on my phone. So, Michael, yes and no. Yes, you're supposed to. But you do need to, there are a couple things. One, you need to make sure that you have notifications enabled, and you also need to make sure that the notifications are set to all notifications, because they have, I'm going to my own right now so I can look and see. They have not only the option for notifications, but they also have, you can choose which notifications to get. So I'm just going to a random thing here. And if you click the little bell icon, shoot, I would have to subscribe first. All right, I'll temporarily subscribe. MSNBC came up, but I have. So I'm going to hit subscribe on that, and then it shows me the bell. And then when you click on the bell icon, it gives you some different options here. It gives you all, personalized, none, or unsubscribe. If you choose personalized as your icon, basically what it does is it sends it to you sometimes. You have to choose all notifications if you want the notifications sent to you. Now, what my wife found, she keeps going in and setting her notifications to my show to all. And then when I'll do another show and she doesn't get a notification, she doesn't know that I've started streaming, she'll go and check, and sure enough, either her notifications have been turned off or it has been changed to personalized. So you need to make sure that it's set to all. And I need to make sure I unsubscribe here from MSNBC because I don't want to follow them. Anyway, and even then, if you have all notifications set, that doesn't guarantee you're going to get it, but it does help. It does help. You just got lucky, happened to see while I was already on YouTube. Yeah. Or while you were already on YouTube. That's how it is, unfortunately. Yeah, I got to keep reminding. I should make some kind of little graphic at the bottom to remind people. Or you know what I should do? I should have a little blurb or video or something during that 5-minute countdown before the show starts. I should have some PSA there about how you need to go in and select all to get the notifications. But like I said, even then you got to keep checking because they do turn that off. Kind of a pain. All right. Patsy Snyder says, I am so tired of fighting for my/our rights. The illusion of choice, corruption, lies, crazy people, sick people, funerals, crime, lousy food, lousy entertainment, electric bills climbing. It sucks. Things are rough right now out there. I feel it too. I truly do. Yeah, I find myself talking with my wife about our budget for things that I haven't been concerned about in years. It's ugly. It's ugly out there, and it is getting worse, and it will continue to get worse for a while. And that's just talking about the financial situation. Politically, things are absolutely insane. I do think that now that you are starting to see big name Trump supporters like Candace Owens and Marjorie Taylor Greene starting to say, this is a bit much. It's nice to see that because that will influence some people. And I think cuts to food stamps, cuts to healthcare or increases in healthcare premiums, things like that are going to affect even Trump supporters. I think that's going to start waking them up. They talk a good talk about how we don't support foreign wars, and then they're like, yeah, so he attacks Iran, so what? So he's sending money and weapons to Israel to commit genocide. Yeah, so what? So he's down there committing acts of war against Venezuela. So what? So he's threatening to go attack Nigeria. Yeah, so what? It doesn't affect them because it's all far away. But you get your your food stamps cut, you can no longer afford to go to the doctor because you can't afford those healthcare premiums anymore. You're having to cut back, and now you got to use only Walmart brand stuff. You can't go for the fancy Heinz. The John Kerry's wife, the heir of the Heinz empire, can't get that anymore. Can't get Hunt's. No, you got to get the dollar store ketchup. That kind of stuff is what's going to end up helping some of the Trump supporters peel away. But I'm telling you, when I go to Twitter and I go through some of these, these long pro-Trump threads, I'll bet you half that stuff, and there are plenty of crazies out there, no question. Half that stuff, they're bots. It creates the appearance of absolute support for Trump, for things that Trump supporters have never supported before. He's going down among his own people. People are finally starting to wake up. Military on our streets, threatening new wars. The tariffs, which are illegal, a form of taxation on the American people. His jackassery with making all of this money, incredible amounts of money off the presidency. His wheeling and dealing with all of these corporate giants, getting personal favors from them in exchange for favorable government contracts. His turning America into he's turning American people into Palestinians. We are facing a growing police state that is cracking down on more and more of us. When he first started, the first thing he did was he went after the college kids and the professors and the people on college campuses who speak out in defiance of the Zionist state and what they were doing to the Palestinians in the West Bank and especially in Gaza. Went after them. I don't like your speech. I don't like that you are criticizing Israel. You're gone. You're here on a visa. Doesn't matter that you're highly qualified. Doesn't matter that you're some of the best in the country. You criticized Israel. You're gone. No free speech for you. Yeah, we are a nation in rapid decline, and it is very alarming, very alarming. What it's going to do is, it's going to, first of all, the Republicans in the elections we just had, they got shellacked across the country, got their asses handed to them in virtually every category. And a year from now, Republicans are going to lose control of the U.S. House and probably the U.S. Senate. And so you're finally going to have Democrats in power, and they have kept their mouths shut. They haven't done much, haven't made waves. Although I think they should have. I think the Democrats are, the Democrat Party, useless. But they're in power. They will come to power, and then you're going to have a lame duck president who's going to struggle to get anything done. And it's going to be a crazy couple of years after that. And then we're going to see a matchup between, you're going to have every single freaking Democrat out there running. It'll be Gavin Newsom's to lose, but he can screw up pretty bad. He's not always good on the stump. So it could be other people. Hopefully Kamala Harris has the good sense to just sit down and keep her trap shut, because nobody wanted her to begin with, not even Democrats. She was handed the nomination, much to the angst of even the Obamas, who are like, How do you just hand her the nomination after Biden says he's not going to run? Where's the open democratic process to choose a candidate? They just gave it to her, which was just stupidity. She never went anywhere in the primaries. She got beat by Joe Biden in the primaries. Nobody wanted her. Cackling Kamala Harris. So, she's talking about, she's making moves like she's going to run again, but nobody wants her. So you're going to end up with you've got different people. Pritzker, there's going to be at least bare minimum 12 big name Democrats running. Maybe Pete Buttigieg will run again. And then on the right, you're going to have Ted Cruz, he's fully in campaign mode. He's already working on it. Marco Rubio may try and challenge J.D. Vance. Of course, Vance is running. So you're going to have basically Trump 2.0 against far to the left. AOC may even run. So we're likely going to end up with Newsom or someone like Newsom in there as president. It's possible that you could end up, because there's such a small margin of control right now, unless it's just a massive gain in the House. You would even potentially in 2028 have the problem of the what would be best is if we have a split. What I always prefer, I never ever thought it was good to have a single polarity in control of everything. I don't want, the Supreme Court is stacked heavy conservative. So in the end, since, Trumpers just appeal everything all the way up to the Supreme Court, they don't accept any lower court or appellate court ruling. Everything's got to go straight to the Supreme Court because they know once they get it there, it's most of the time it'll go Trump's way since he appointed so many of them. But the judicial branch is stacked conservative. When Trump is in power, or a J.D. Vance type Trumper in power in the executive branch, you don't want the legislative branch there to rubber stamp everything they do. The founders didn't want a two-party system like this, but more than that, they did not want to see any ideology, any particular group dominate the three branches of the government. The point of having three separate co-equal branches is to have a balance of power so that no one branch or no one ideology can take off, because it always ends up hurting the people. So if we have a Democrat in the White House, I would like to see a Republican-controlled legislature. If we have a Republican in the White House, I want to see a Democrat-controlled legislature, not because I want the Democrats' ideas implemented on most things. It's because it slows down the growth of federal government. And it is good to have a foil keeping the other side in check. We had a good system in place, for example, even though I loathed the politics of Bill Clinton, which were very conservative by most Democrat standards. It was a good setup because we had a strong Republican Party in control of the U.S. House. Democrats still had the Senate, but they could, it requires a bill can't just pass the Senate. It's got to pass the House and the Senate before it goes to the president's desk to sign or veto. So having checks and balances is good. It means that, remember, anything that the legislature does is an expansion of federal power. The reason that New York Democrat Grover Cleveland was the best president America has ever had is because he did nothing to grow the size of the federal government, and he vetoed more bills sent to him from the Congress than any other president in history. He was basically saying, government's big enough. We don't need more power. We don't need to do more. We don't need to meddle in other countries. We don't need to send troops around. We need to focus on gold and silver, keeping our financial system strong, and keeping the growth of government as low as possible. I don't care that he was a Democrat. That's what I want in a president. So back during the Clinton years, you had Newt Gingrich and the Republicans keeping him in check, and also he was there to veto anything that was too wild from the Republicans. And so there wasn't a big growth in government. In fact, we ended up during the Clinton years having the first balanced budget in decades. In fact, the only time, I think, since World War II when we've had a balanced budget was during the Clinton years. They got spending under control. The Republicans in Congress primarily, with John Kasich and other fiscal conservatives in there. But Clinton knew he had to go along with this, and so he did. He was a scumbag of a human being. And Obamacare had its origins in Hillary Care. That was kind of her signature thing, because they knew they eventually wanted her to run for president. But she had no political experience. So they were like, oh yeah, during the first Clinton term, when he took office he won in 92, took office beginning of 93. They were like, well, let's give Hillary something. And so universal health care was her thing. And America said, nope, no thanks. We don't want universal health care back then. But anyway, I think that's the best thing. Ideologically, I would be considered either a paleo Republican or really a libertarian Republican, more like Barry Goldwater. But he was an aberration. Barry Goldwater was basically an early version of Ron Paul, Senator Goldwater, and he ran for president. He got hammered. He ran against Lyndon Johnson for president. Johnson took over after Kennedy was shot, and then when Johnson ran for president after that, he was matched up against Goldwater, and it was one of the biggest lopsided defeats in presidential history. Johnson crushed him. And so the Republicans were like, yeah, let's not do that anymore. And that's really where Ronald Reagan came from. That's how he came to national prominence, was he had been a governor out there in California, but he gave the keynote address at the Republican nominating convention when Goldwater was made the nominee. That's where people first got their taste of Ronald Reagan on a national stage as a potential leader of the Republican Party. And then Reagan ran later on, but didn't get the nomination, not until the 1980 election. And he coined the "Make America Great Again" was his campaign slogan in 1980, which is where Donald Trump stole it from. Rhinoceros says, Jake, do you remember? I'll wait here for the rest. I'm on the edge of my seat. Do I remember what? And the comment before that, all systems corrupt. You just need to reset the system once in a while. Yeah, we've gotten to the point where we're too big. We're too big as a country. The government has become too bloated. The danger is now that we have so many people here, hit that reset button now, and we'll become balkanized. We won't go back together as 50 U.S. states again. It's a bad situation. Bad situation we're in. I fear a new constitutional convention because ideologies have changed so much from the days of our founding generation. People don't understand. People don't understand basic principles anymore. A new constitution would not resemble anything like the one that we have now. And there would be no ratification. They wouldn't be able to successfully ratify because we're so polarized. The states are so polarized that you wouldn't have a consensus. You wouldn't have. You'd have a situation where, like the income tax, the 16th Amendment, it was never properly ratified. But we're taught that it was, but it wasn't. That's what we would have is a bunch of proposals that don't end up getting ratified. But politicians would get in there and do something like Trump did. Some crazy scheme where people don't really. A lot of people don't understand the criticism of what happened on January 6th. They don't understand it, but it was diabolical. And I still have, I don't know if I've got it in this archive now or not, but back in 2020 on election night, I did a 7 or 8 hour live stream. And before the polls had even closed, I explained to you what was going to happen. I said, Trump's going to lose the election. He's going to lose because I had tracked it. Track the polling and everything, my own polling. Trump was going to lose, and he was going to lose in some red states. Biden was going to take some states away from him. He was going to lose some of the states that he had previously won in 2016. And the plan was, knowing in advance, I laid it all out on election night. I said, Trump will not concede tonight. Doesn't matter how many millions of votes he's behind. What he's going to do is refuse to concede. He's going to claim election fraud. He's going to tie it up in the courts, but only in those states where there are Republican-controlled legislatures. It's funny how the only states that there was election fraud in happened to be in states where there were Republican-controlled legislatures. And that's where the bulk of the lawsuits took place, over 60 lawsuits. Most of them dismissed due to lack of standing. But the point was you tie everything up and you game the system. The way that the U.S. Constitution is written, there is a certain date by which the federal government, the U.S. Congress, must certify who won the election. And so each state has to, in their individual states, and the U.S. Constitution does not say how it has to be done. So every state has their own individual way of doing it, where inside their state, they certify their own votes. They do the election counting. Usually the state legislatures will say, okay, we've got the votes counted, got it all turned in from all of the different counties in the state. We've got the state election certification of this. And so here, as the state legislature, we certify, we rubber stamp the results. And so the electors from our state, because you don't vote for the president, you vote for the electors for the president. The electors for the state of Michigan, we assign them to Biden or to Trump. And then they send their stuff in, has to go in, so that the U.S. Congress can certify at the national level on January 6th the results of the election. And that is how the Constitution works. That's how the new president is locked in. However, here was the Trump plan, which I detailed for hours. I talked about this because I knew what he was going to do. I said he's going to sue in the states where there are Republican-controlled legislatures. He'll sue in multiple states, but especially in those. Because what you do is you tie it up for as long as you can so that the state legislatures will have to say, all right, we're required, we have to, based on our state laws, we have to submit to the Congress, U.S. Congress, by the 6th or by whatever the date was. Our electors, our slate of electors have to submit that. But if on January 6th, for whatever reason, the U.S. Congress cannot certify who won the election, it gets kicked back to the state legislatures to determine who won their state again. Basically, it's a redo. Now, in those red states where you have Trump loyalists in the state legislatures, what you do on January 6th, this was the reason that he had the big rally on January 6th. This is the reason he sent the people to the U.S. Capitol at the exact moment that the U.S. Congress was in the process of certifying. This is why you had agitators embedded among the people to start the fights, to start the rioting. It was intended to stop the U.S. And this is why he was so furious with Mike Pence. Pence was supposed to say there are questions still in some of these states. There are still lawsuits ongoing questioning whether or not the voting was fair in those states. And so what he told Mike Pence to do, which Mike Pence refused to do, to his credit, Trump told him, you as vice president have to oversee this January 6th process. You must certify. So I am telling you, Mike Pence, don't certify it. Send it back to the states and let them decide. Because then what can happen is in those red states that Trump lost, doesn't matter if he won the state, there's nothing to be gained. He already won the state. There's no question. But in those states that he lost, that happen to have Republican-controlled legislatures, then you have the state legislatures say, you know what? Since we have ongoing questions in the court, because Trump is suing, and these cases are not going to be done anytime soon, we take it as our power as a state legislature to say we think there is merit to what Trump is saying, that there were shenanigans, and that even though our first certification, Biden won by 1 million votes, we think that there's enough, or however many, couple 100,000, we think that it's uncertain and there may have been chicanery, so we are going to instead declare it for Trump. And you flip the electors from Biden now over to Trump. That is why Trump and his lawyers had gone around to these states and set up false sets of alternative electors, Republicans, who they swore to vote for Trump. That was the plan. And then it goes back to the U.S. Congress with new sets of electors, now more of them in favor of Trump because Trump was suing in those states. The legislatures say, we don't know, so we're just going to give it to Trump, even though our own state officials previously certified it for Biden. It's all, it's a big question. Who actually won? We're going to give it to Trump just to be safe. That was the plan. Then it goes back to the U.S. Congress again. Now Trump has got more electors. When you're only dealing with electors rather than the popular vote, it's much easier to steal an election. That is how Donald Trump tried to steal the 2020 election, through fraud. That's why a lot of these electors ended up being prosecuted, these fake electors that were part of the scheme. That's why a bunch of them got prosecuted and went to jail. That is why people like Rudy Giuliani, who are a big part of this, got disbarred. That's why some of Trump's people went to jail, because it was a fraudulent attempt to steal the election, to overturn the results of the 2020 election using trickery in court and relying on the loyalties of his bootlickers in state legislatures. So I understand what he did. People are like, oh, what are you talking about? They weren't trying to overthrow. It wasn't an insurrection. Just because so many of them were too stupid to know how they were being used to commit insurrection does not absolve them from participating in it, from doing it, from going there, trying to keep the Congress from voting. That's what they did. They tried to stop the certification. That's why they were chanting about hanging Mike Pence, not because of things that Pence had done in the past. It's because in the speech before he sent them over to the Capitol, Trump said, Mike has not done his job. So they go out there, we're going to hang Mike Pence, furious about that. The goal was stop the Congress from certifying, from completing their vote, throw it back to the states, let Trump loyalist state legislatures throw away the Biden certifications, recertify it for Trump because Trump was in the middle of lawsuits, tying it up in the courts, send it back to the Congress, and now you've got more electors for Trump, and you give him the election. And Trump supporters don't understand that that's what it was all about. That was the scam. That was the scheme. And that is why, aside from Abraham Lincoln, up until January 6th, Trump was not in my top 5 worst presidents. I had him at like number 7. But after that, went straight to number 2. And if it weren't for the nearly 1 million Americans that died in the Civil War, that was an unavoidable war, and it was an avoidable war, I would have Trump at number 1. In fact, from time to time, I think, Jake, why don't you just change your standards here and just bump Trump up to number 1? But honestly, what Lincoln did to America, I think, was pretty bad. But Trump, he is a solid, close behind number 2 for worst president in history, because he is the only president to overtly try and steal the election and weaponize the people against the U.S. Constitution. Michael says, thanks, Jake. I had no idea this was the goal. Yeah, that was exactly it. And it was apparent to me because I pay a lot of attention to politics and to the things that I think matter. All this, the back and forth between the Democrats and Republicans, and he said this, and that doesn't matter. What matters are the lawyers and what they're doing, the party lawyers. I used to be a big Republican. If you're new to Blackstone and you don't know my background, I was a big time Republican years ago. I was planning on one day running for Congress. Throughout my 20s, I grew up in a political family. Throughout my teens, I was involved in the political process. I was a youth campaign manager. I was in high school. I was the president of the high school Republicans. After high school, I was the president of my college's student body and got heavy into politics. I worked as campaign manager for the political campaigns of Watauga County Republicans, running for various offices, local and state offices. Our awful U.S. Congresswoman that we've got, Virginia Fox, she was still a state senator back then, and I knew she was dirty even back then. And so I was helping out with campaigns for tons of candidates, but not her. Not her. But anyway, I went from that into, I did work for, I was hired on as the state campaign manager for presidential candidate Steve Forbes in the 2000 presidential election. I did not want George W. Bush to win the nomination for the party because I knew he was a neocon. I had worked for his dad as a youth campaign coordinator back in '88. I'm like, no more. I learned my lesson from that. No more Bushes in the White House. But number two behind Bush was John McCain. I'm like I'm going to support John McCain. The only option in the Republican Party at that time was a very libertarian-leaning guy named Steve Forbes. So I went to work for him. And I coordinated his campaign throughout North Carolina. They didn't have a South Carolina coordinator, so they had me doing a little bit down there. They had me come down on South Carolina is one of the states where they have presidential debates every 4 years. They host a presidential debate. So they had me come down to Columbia and meet Mr. Forbes there at the hotel before the presidential debate. And I sat there next to him, talking with him while he's getting his makeup done, because you're going to be on TV, so you need your makeup done. And then I drove him and, press that were with him, drove him in the van to the event, escorted him in, met tons of people. I met John McCain, Strom Thurmond, all of the presidential candidates, George W. Bush, everybody. Bush chuckled at me when I refused to shake his hand. You've got the presidential debate right there. I was standing right behind the curtain, right off to the side. Brian Williams from NBC was the moderator. Had Alan Keyes, Gary Bauer, Orrin Hatch, John McCain, Bush, Forbes. I think that Orrin Hatch was running. A bunch of guys. And then immediately after the debate, I took Forbes over he went to speak to an Amway convention as a surprise speaker. So after Forbes, was knocked out, the Bush campaign offered me a position with them. And I was like, hell no. I love politics, and that would definitely be good on my resume to have worked for the guy who's probably going to become president. But no. So I went back. I got hired after that to work for Bill Hyatt, who was a state representative. He was the Secretary of Transportation for North Carolina, but he was a member of the state Congress. I worked for him, helped him win his campaign. And I stayed involved in politics. I toned it down a bit. I didn't have as much time to when I worked for Ron Paul, but I was a writer for the Ron Paul campaign in 2008. That's back when Alex Jones started. Alex Jones discovered me in 2008, and he would post all my stuff. I was a writer, so I wrote tons of stuff about Ron Paul and his libertarian positions, and so Alex Jones would repost all my stuff on the front page of InfoWars and Prison Planet. And I worked for the Ron Paul campaign again in 2012. And so by 2016, I was totally fed up with I had lost my faith in the Republican Party back in 2000 when they went with Bush. But I stayed a member of the party because I still had plans to run at some point for Congress, and it would not look good if I was out of the party. So I kept my party affiliation for that purpose. But I'll tell you what did it for me when I finally said, you know what, I have no intent, I will not run as a Republican no matter what, was January 6th. The day that January 6th happened, and the Republicans stood by Trump and they didn't come out against him for what he had done, I said, F this. I am done with these people. At no point in the future am I going to want to be a part of that party. It was a literal attempt to overthrow a presidential election. And I will not be, even in name only, I'm not going to be part of the Republican Party. But my roots are, I was very conservative. I was always more conservative, fiscally conservative. On social issues, I had my personal views on things, but I just didn't see it as the more libertarian minded. I didn't see it as a place for government to be legislating morality. So I didn't want gay marriage. I didn't want heterosexual marriage. I did not want the government deciding who can get married. I didn't think it's something that should be regulated by government. These are private decisions. So I was like that on most things. Keep government out of my life. Let me live my life the way I want to. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me I need to register for this or that I need a license to do this, that I need a license to do that. Leave me the hell alone. Let me be an adult, make up my own decisions. That was my way of doing things. I've never been a big government kind of when it comes to policies. I've never been Democrat in my thinking. Now, I'm more willing to compromise for the sake of making some progress than I was when I was younger. And there are some things as society has changed where for example, I used to strongly opposed Obamacare. But Obamacare is here now. And so we have to work within what we have. They're not going to repeal it. They're not going to get rid of it. Trump made a tepid effort to do it. He promised he was going to repeal Obamacare. Got in there, was like, yeah, maybe we could try. Yeah, whatever. Don't worry about it. So it's here to stay. So you work within the system. Let's make it the best we can. And that means controlling premiums and so on and so forth. So I'm a realist. I deal with things as they really are, not just how I wish they would be. And that's, if I have any criticism of Ron Paul, it's that his son Rand is functions more in reality than Ron did. Ron was an idea man, but he just never got anything done. He did the Grover Cleveland thing. He said he was Mr. No to everything, voted against everything, which is good. I liked that, but we've got the problem is that rendered him, other than his voice, his teaching, which is very valuable. As a member of Congress, he didn't accomplish hardly anything. Whereas Rand Paul, who is not as strict or staunch as his dad, is actually a far more effective legislator. He doesn't get everything he wants, but he often steers things in the right direction. He tries to make a difference, and sometimes he does. I still think he's a sellout. I think Rand Paul sold out to try and stay in the good graces of the Trump community. because I think one day he's going to want to try and run again. But anyway, so I've come around to where I understand. There needs to be some give and take, and so that's why I'm willing to be reasonable on and budge to a degree on some things that in the past I'd be like, hell no, I'm not budging an inch on this. Reagan was good as a leader where you'd be surprised. People often thought, well, I don't know, this generation, nobody knows Reagan anymore. But at the time, he was a big deal. But Reagan was not conservative. Reagan went along with major spending by the Democrats in order to get what he wanted. He wanted major spending for military and, this whole nuclear arms race. He was involved with Gorbachev. And so he needed money. He wanted money for Star Wars. He wanted all this stuff. And so if that meant he had to give the Democrats, who controlled Congress, a lot of things they wanted, that's what he did. He was not one who was like, yeah, here's the line, we're not crossing it, nothing. And, I bash Trump, but on some things, I think it's good that he's got some Democrat background because that ekes out a little bit sometimes. So he's not a real conservative. He's not even a Republican. But that background sneaks out sometimes and makes him more reasonable. For example, on immigration, for all the talk that he does about immigration, when he ran for president in 2016, it got him in trouble with his base. But he said, look, we've got to be realistic. We've got over 10 million dreamers, children who were they don't have legal status. They were brought here as kids by their parents. They don't have legal status, but they grew up in America. And it would be cruel to just take these, kids who all they know is they're American, to take them in and boot them out of the country. Now, hardcore Republicans, they're like, no, absolutely. We deport all of them. Deport all of them. And Trump was like, that's just not realistic. We got to have a pathway to citizenship. And he learned really quick he needed to stop talking like that because it was getting him in trouble with the base. But I think that's somewhat reasonable. Go after the hardcore criminals. Go after repeat offenders. If you deport someone and they come back again, to me, it doesn't matter if they break other laws. If you deport them once and they come back a second time, no mercy. Get rid of them. But these kids that were brought here, spent their whole lives here, fully integrated in American society, can't tell a difference between them and any other American. Provide some reasonable pathway where if they meet certain requirements, they've demonstrated assimilation, they've demonstrated loyalty to America, they're paying taxes, they're productive members of society, make some pathway for them to become U.S. citizens. Trump was for that. He changed his mind and said, absolutely not, I'm not for that, because he knew that the Republicans wanted him to say something else. But that's an example of where I think there can be reasonable compromise. It's a huge issue. Immigration is a huge issue. The whole DACA thing, very controversial, but when you look at the size and scope of the problem, you got to deal with it in a reasonable way. You got to do what you can, do the best you can with what you have to work with. And anyway, that's it. That's old age, I think, has tempered some of that. I look at these young bucks like Fuentes and others, and I think I remember when I was like that. Not with his rhetoric. I mean, he's extreme, but with the no retreat, no surrender, don't budge an inch. I remember that quite well. I remember worst flub of my political life was during the my high school had a speech and debate contest in 1988, a mock election between George H.W. Bush and Dukakis. And I was the leader of the Republican Party in the high school, and so I was the keynote speaker and the lead debater for the Republicans. And the part of the program, you had the everybody's assembled. You had on one side of the gymnasium, you had all the students that were, it was, for the whole student body. All the students that were pro-Bush were on one side. All the students that were pro-Dukakis were on the other. And if you were undecided, you sat in the middle on the floor. And after each speech, you could get up and switch sides if you felt swayed by that by that speech. And so after the speeches, next came the debate portion. And what they would do was they had questions from the audience on controversial topics. And they would, me as the team leader, I'd get up and they'd hand, a slip of paper to me, and I'd have to read it there at the podium and then give my answer on the Republican position. And I don't remember what it had something to do with Dukakis being of Greek ancestry. My last name is Morphonios. That's a Greek name. I grew up, even though I don't have Greek blood in me, I grew up down in Miami going to Greek events. We lived just around the corner from the Greek Orthodox Church. They had Greek festivals every year. I ate everything. Greek food like crazy. So I had nothing against Greeks, but I was in Podunk, North Carolina, up in the Redneckville, and I used it, and I ended my debate segment with this fiery pounding the whatever about how hot dogs, apple pie, and immigrant and people from Greece for president don't mix. Rah! People cheering, and I sat down and I was feeling pretty doggone good about myself. Later on, it was either that day or the next day at lunch, and I was a freshman. A senior, a guy named, his last name sounded like Kilbasa. It wasn't Kilbasa, but it was something like that. It was a Greek name. And he was a good debater. And he came over and he quietly said to me, "That thing you said about Greeks I thought was in poor taste." That's all he said. And he walked away. And that stung me hard. He was, big liberal. Normally I wouldn't care. And I hadn't thought about it, but I realized, you know what? I appealed to the racism of the masses to win. I would have won regardless. I mean, we stomped Dukakis. I had some friends come in. I made prison uniforms, the white and black stripes. They were going around handing out get out of jail free cards because Dukakis had furloughed some people like Willie Horton that had gone out and killed again. And, it was big, I was a carnival barker. I would have made a great Trumper if I had followed that path. But anyway, despite winning big in the election, I realized it kind of stuck me in my heart, my conscience. It pricked my conscience. Keith was his first name, the guy that said that to me. He wasn't mean about it, wasn't nasty. He just said, that was in poor taste. And I realized, yeah, I won, but there's a right way to win. And I should not be appealing to the prejudices of the people, even if I feel like the ends justifies the means. Really, it doesn't. And that affected me to this day. Here I am, whatever it is, 40 years later, 35 to 40 years later. I'm 52 now, just turned 52. I would have been 14 or 15 at that time, probably 15 as a freshman. Stuck with me ever since. And so that I think that's one reason why I feel offended and upset when I see Donald Trump doing the same thing, preying on the passions and prejudices of the people, stoking fear, taking advantage of fears when there are legitimate concerns. You know, our demographics are changing. The stuff that Fuentes is always talking about. You know, do we preserve a white majority and blah, blah, blah. Well, sorry, it's changing. It is going to change. By 2050, there will be no white majority in America. We're already on a trend based on the birth rates, everything else. By 2050, there will be no ethnic majority in America anymore. We will be below 50%. We're going to be down around 45%. We'll just be one of a number of minorities. And that is going to bring all kinds of challenges. I'm not saying that whites are better, but I am saying that in most societies where there is no majority, when you have a system of multiculturalism, you have a lot more of a fractured society, a lot more fighting. When I lived in Thailand, there was like, what? In the whole country, we had 100 white people. In almost every town I lived in other than Bangkok, I was the only white guy. And that was fine. There was no chance that I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna push my American culture here and become the dominant culture over. I don't like the way that you Theravada Buddhists do it here. I'm gonna push my Christianity or my Americanism or whatever. There's no chance. Don't have the power to do it there when there's a clear majority. When you get to a point, though, in most of these countries, like in Europe, where there has been a flood of mass immigration, a rush of multiculturalism, conflicting, competing cultures that are not melting together, it doesn't work, and you have strife, and you have fighting, and you have problems. So unless in the future, the ethnic demographics or racial demographics don't matter so much if you are blended together as a melting pot, if you have a shared culture. But if you have competing cultures, competing systems, if you've got a large segment that wants Sharia, large segment that wants to impose Christian nationalism, large segment that wants this from their country, you're going to have more violence, more strife without a dominant majority. So I'm not, but that's the good thing about America or what used to be a good thing, is that when you came to America, you can be Iranian, you can be Syrian, you can be African, Irish, Scottish, Japanese descent, doesn't matter. You come here and you become an American. Regardless of the color of your skin, doesn't matter. Your religion, doesn't matter. You're an American if you ascribe to the same values of other Americans, and that is rule under a constitutional system, respect for the rule of law, things like that, shared appreciation for the defense of freedom, no warmongering with other countries, these kinds of things. Fine, you mesh, you work. So hopefully that will be the case come 2050. Hopefully we are not broken up And I think even though there has been since the 1990s, since the NAFTA decimated the agricultural section in the agricultural sector in Mexico, which is the primary reason we had a massive influx of illegal immigration and the rise of the drug cartels in Mexico, was the way that NAFTA destroyed their agriculture jobs. Many of them are, they're proud. You see them wave Mexican flags, or they got the Mexican flags, hanging from their rearview mirror or whatever. But they're Americans, most of them. And that's not a problem. In fact, based on the demographic changes taking place, now that we have dropped below that 1.6 births per 100 necessary to maintain a certain demographic majority, we're already, it's guaranteed whites will be will be a minority by 2050. The good thing is we actually have a lot in common with our southern neighbor from Mexico. We have, at least here in North Carolina, and I know a lot of places across the country, there are very good relations between the immigrant communities, the Mexican immigrant communities, and others. Now, I also lived in Miami, where there was a massive Cuban population. And at least back then when I lived there, despite it being a very different culture that they came from, they were proud to be Americans. And there was no racial strife for the most part. There was some, but they were Americans, proud to be Americans. That's what we need. If we turn around and we treat Mexican immigrants like they don't belong here, sooner or later, they're going to start hating us. And then we're going to have the rise of a multicultural society. And I don't mean, when I say multicultural, I'm not talking about they have of course there's different culture. They do different things. They have Mexican music, Mexican food, social activities. That culture is not the culture I'm talking about. I'm talking about incompatible cultures where they come in and they're like, let's impose on the United States of America our political system from Mexico. Our way of doing it there is superior. We were better people there. You guys don't know what you're doing here. That's the kind of multiculturalism I'm talking about. That's the concern over in France and Spain and England, the UK, and elsewhere, where you have large numbers of people coming in demanding Sharia law, because it is a different system. It's not just we come from a Muslim heritage, Muslim culture. That's not the problem. The problem is those factions that come in and say, our way is better, you adopt our way, you respect our Sharia, ours are superior to your laws, Sweden or whatever, and you're going to do it our way, or we're going to get violent. That's the problem. That's what I'm talking about. We don't have that problem with really with any of the Hispanic immigrants. Definitely not with the Mexican population. So I essentially, even though they wouldn't probably appreciate this, when I think in terms of demographics, I don't even think in America of our Hispanic community being a different ethnic group. I just think of them as whites. And I don't mean white skin. I mean whites as in we're part of the same group. We're North Americans. Kind of like I would consider Canadians essentially the same as whites, regardless of their skin color. Yeah, and Joshua and Zerubbabel says, and they're Christians too. They come from a similar religious background as well. Of course, a lot more Catholic than ours, but same idea. Someone asked earlier if I was Orthodox. No, I'm not. I'm not Orthodox. No, and never was. My dad became, as an adult when he got married. My dad's wife that he's married to, she's only 5 years older than me, but she's from Colombia. She was a foreign student from Colombia. Her family owned, I don't know if it's the biggest pharmaceutical company in Colombia or just one of them, but they sent her at 16 years old to the United States to live with my grandmother. Her mother had been my grandmother's maid years ago. But anyway, she came to America at 16 to get an American education. She finished high school at actually a Catholic school, then went on to was it University of Miami? I forget which college down there in Miami, pharmacy school. Got her degree in pharmacy. The idea was she was going to get her education here, go back to Colombia, and help run the company down there. But she and my dad ended up getting married, and she, of course, decided to stay here in the United States, and has been a pharmacy manager for decades now. She's real successful as a pharmacist. Where was I going with that? I don't even know what I was going to talk about. Oh, but anyway, she was Roman Catholic. My dad was nothing. He wasn't didn't go to any church, didn't have any particular religious beliefs, but her family was very devout Roman Catholic, and so they were okay with her marrying either a Roman Catholic or another kind of Catholic. My dad, having grown up like I did with, in Greek culture because of our name, he joined went through the schooling or catechisms. I don't know what you call it, to become a Greek Orthodox, and he became Greek Orthodox. But anyway. But I never did. I've been to some services, but I've been to services for most Catholic and Protestant denominations, major denominations in America. Michael says, here in San Antonio, the Hispanic culture has no issues being American. They are more family oriented than most Anglos. That's often the case. It's often the case. Will says, Mexicans must be the most conservative people in Latin America, way more than here in Brazil. I had a son who lived down in Mexico for, I don't know, year or so, year and a half, something like that. And I've been to Mexico a handful of times. I used to be able to speak Spanish quite well, having grown up in Miami, but I started losing my Spanish when I started learning Thai, and the more fluent I became in Thai, because it's totally different sentence structure and everything, I started losing my Spanish, and so I still have basic conversations. When I go to a Mexican restaurant, I still order in Spanish, but I can't carry on conversations like I used to. The Epic says, Jake, I am Mexican American, born in East Texas. Cool, very cool. We've got a lot of Mexicans here in North Carolina. A lot of Mexicans. And my one of my sons, his best friend is Mexican. Yeah, I think we have very similar values, very similar backgrounds, and it would be to the benefit of our country if there was a lot less I don't want to just call it racism, but discrimination, eyes of suspicion from some people in America toward our Hispanic community, particularly the Mexican community. Family is from El Paso and North Mexico, like the state of Chihuahua. In fact, brother down in North Mexico, they're majority cowboy in those regions. Very cool. Most want to escape the crime. Yep. Well, we certainly did our part, or at least our government did its part in on behalf of the big corporations pushing to, and we screwed ourselves too with farming. It's why America, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, there's so much that we stopped growing, and we basically just started growing nothing but corn for ethanol and junk like that, corn syrup. But a lot of stuff that used to be grown up until the 90s down there in Mexico, we used to import tons of agriculture. We still do get some, but we were very, very reliant on Mexican agriculture. And then the free trade gave financial incentives to U.S. farmers to start undercutting Mexican farmers. We destroyed their agriculture, especially corn, starting with corn. And eventually, with so many people out of work, you had the rise of marijuana growing, and then beyond that, worsening drug cartel activity, and it's just become a hellscape in a lot of areas. And I don't fault people at all for wanting to get away from that and come into America. We need a better system for it. Anyway, well, guys, it's right at 2:00 here, East Coast time. We've been on about 3.5 hours. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to say thanks to those of you out there who donated. Thanks to everyone who hit the thumbs up. And if you haven't done it already, if you enjoyed tonight's conversation, whether you totally agree or not, just if you like the exchange of ideas where everybody's welcome to share their ideas, hit the thumbs up for me. I would appreciate that. I'm looking at about 123 likes out there, and it would be really great if we could bump that up some. Throughout the stream, we've had over 900 different people check in here during the stream. Let's see if we can get those likes up a little bit before you head out. Michael says, thanks, Jake. Been informative. Thank you, Michael, for listening. And thank you for the donation, my brother. Do appreciate you. And we'll do another stream here in another 2 or 3 days. Make sure you guys go to Substack, sign up for that free newsletter there, or the free option. Again, that is blackstoneintel.substack.com. Link is there. Actually, maybe I need to put the HTTPS there. blackstoneintel.com/substack.com. There we go. All right. Thank you, Beyond the Veil. You have a good night and good day. Thank you to everyone out there for your support. Let's make our country a better place. Make the world a better place by making our own local communities better. Start with you. Let it start with me. Let change start with me. Don't wait for others. Take the initiative. Even if nobody else around you makes changes for the better, you do it for yourself. Stand alone if you have to. Just don't be a follower. No group thinking. Check your facts. Check your sources. Don't be quick to believe bad things about other people. and try and be a little more forgiving, a little more patient, a little more tolerant, and we'll fix things. We'll make it better. Maybe ugly for a while, but the pendulum will swing back the other way. Maybe we can speed it up a little bit, though, with individual acts of random kindness and goodness to those around us. All right, there you go. That's right. Be the change you want to see in the world. All right, guys, have a great night. Talk with you next time. Bye-bye.